Today is May 9th, 1997. The survivor whom I will be interviewing is Edward Davis, who was born Edward David. My name is Linda Wimmer. This is an interview in Allentown, Pennsylvania, the US of A, and the interview will be conducted in English. My name is Linda Wimmer, W-I-M-M-E-R. Today is May the 9th, 1997, and I will be conducting this interview with my new friend, Mr. Edward Davis, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, United States of America. Please tell me your name.
My name is Edward Davis.
How do you spell your name?
D-A-V-S. P-I-S.
And what was your name at birth?
My name at birth was Edward, last name David, which was changed after I came to America to Davis.
Okay. And was your name David throughout the war?
Well, as it happened in many Jewish families before the war, in Austria, during the Habsburg monarchy, that part of Poland was part of the Austrian monarchy. Many Jewish people simply got married ritually, and it was not registered in the town hall or wherever it officially would have to be married. So consequently, the children of a marriage like this were named, carried the last name of their mother. So this was the reason that I also had a second name, last name that was used occasionally, and that was Heublum, H-E-U-B-L-U-M.
Thank you. Did you have a Hebrew name?
My Hebrew name is David.
Okay. And did you have a name in Yiddish?
No.
Okay. Did you have a nickname?
Well, I had a nickname because from Edward in Polish, I spoke with my parents Polish, so, and my family. So from Edward, as a baby, it was Edzio, and Edzio Ejunio, and then you could delete the E, it was Junio, and that as I grew into boyhood, I was called Junek.
And what was the date of your birth?
I was born March 22nd, 1923.
Were you circumcised after you were
Yes,
born?
I was.
Okay. Today, how old are you?
I'm 74 years of age.
And would you tell me where you were born, please?
Yes, I was born, it was then a part of the Polish state. The city is called Drohobycz, and it's the nearest large city is Lvov, or Lemberg in German, as it was called in Austria.
Could you tell me about your family, please? Your
Yes,
parents?
My family consists of my parents, father and mother, and we were 4 children. I was the youngest of the family.
Could you tell me your parents' names, please?
Yes. My father was Herman David, or Herman Heublum. My mother was Anna. Her last name was Friedman or Stegman. And this again pertains to the ritual marriages rather than registered in the county house.
I understand. When were they born?
Well, as far as I know, I don't have the exact date of their birth, but they were born in 1887.
1887. And what were their occupations?
Well, my father we had a grocery store, and mother helped in the store.
And where was that?
That was on Stryjska ulica, and the street was Stryjska, and the town was Drohobycz, in our own house.
The store was in your house?
Right. I mean the building, not in our apartment.
All right, I understand. Did you have brothers and sisters? You started to tell me about
Right.
them.
The family consists out of the oldest brother, sister, my brother that survived the war in Russia, and myself.
And what were their names and birth dates?
Right. My brother, the oldest, his name was Leon. He was born, again, I don't have the exact date. I'll give you the year, 1912. My sister, Tonya, was born in 1913. This was before the First World War. Then father was a soldier during the war, and there was an interruption in the family. And when the war ended, father came home from war. So my brother was born in my second brother was born in 1919. His name is Ludwig, and I was born in 1923.
What were your brothers and sister like?
Well, they were pleasant, jovial. To me, it was a part of my life. They helped me in different ways. They took me to being that there was a span of difference in the age, 1912 and 1913, and I was 1923. So I was sort of favored in the family, and was to sport events and going on little trips out of town, wandering in the mountains. This was near the Carpathian Mountains.
Can you tell me more about your family life when you were growing up in Drohobych?
Well, the store was not a simple affair. It had to be tended. Somebody had to be there all the time, and often two people. So mother and father were busy in the store. Often things had to be supplied. So in other words, father would have to go to the wholesale house and arrange for a transport of something, this or that. So mother, besides being the housewife and mother, also had to spend a good part of her time in the store. Also, when my brother, oldest brother, and sister also, when they were free, done with their homework, they also chipped in and helped in the store.
When you were not in the store but in your home, what language did your family speak in the home?
Well, my family spoke to the older children in Yiddish, and to Ludwig and me in Polish. And the reason for that is Poland became again independent after the First World War in 1918. It was a Polish state. So in other words, under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Habsburg monarchy, there was that Polish language was not in use so much, in usage. There was no need to do that. So they did speak like they spoke between themselves. Yiddish, they spoke also to the oldest brother, and the sister in Yiddish.
And in the store and outside of your home, what
Right.
languages were spoken?
Well, Polish, of course, and there was the population of Drohobych was just about evenly divided in three parts between Polish, Jewish, and Ukrainian. So it was Ukrainian also a part of the daily language or daily speaking. Many customers were Ukrainians, and so to them you had to speak Ukrainian.
In Drohobych, before the war, you said that there were Jews, Poles, and Ukrainians.
Right.
How did your family get along with your non-Jewish neighbors?
My family got along very well. They were very well liked by neighbors and customers. family and parents and family. As a matter of fact, because of this, soon after the German occupation, there were excesses against Jews, but my father, outside of little altercation, had been sort of protected by the friendly relation that they maintained over the years with neighbors.
Okay.
I just want to add that it wasn't, we lived on a Ulica Stryjska, which was one of the main arteries leading to town and from town, and Jews were scattered. Maybe after each 100, 200 meters, or which meant several houses further, there were here Jewish family, Ukrainians or Poles, and then again few Jewish family, one Jewish family, and single Jewish families were scattered along that street.
Let's go back to the street into your home if we can for a moment. Can you describe your home for us?
Yes, it was a, in English you would say, in America you would say, two-story house, a ground floor and the first floor. The ground floor contained the store and a warehouse in the back, another room, and the other side of the building was an apartment where we rented it out to a tenant. The upstairs was our apartment on one side, and also the same thing on the other side, another apartment. Also on the back of the lot, which was a long lot stretching from the street to a little stream in the back, there was another house, and this was also rented to a family.
And you owned that house also, your
Right.
family?
Right.
Can you describe the furnishings, the silverware, the interior of the home, of the rooms in which your family lived?
Well, the house consisted of a kitchen and two rooms. It wasn't in today's, if you compare it to today's modern living, it was different. There was no running hot water. There was no toilet facilities in the house. All this had to be done outside. Water hauled from the yard in a well, and the toilet facilities were further down the lot. We had, because the family was busy, parents in the store, keeping the house, and there was the usual thing. I say the usual thing because we had a servant, a girl from the one of the villages around Drohobych. They were very poor, they didn't have enough to eat, so they were looking for work and gladly came to see, and they were really a part of the family. We took them in, and they gave us all their hearts, so I could really say that there was a perfect harmony. They lived the life with us.
And how many years did your servants live with you at one stretch?
Well, as the girls got older, there were usually girls about 20, 21, maybe 18, well, in the 20s, I would say. And as they got, some got married and wanted to return back to the village, so there were many girls that were looking for jobs, and it was not a problem to get a girl like that to come in and work. She had the Sunday off, and she ate with us, she slept with us, and she was a part of it.
Can you describe for me, please, the extent to which your family observed Jewish rituals and law in your home during this pre-war period?
Right. My father was a modern man. I mean, not religion, yes, but I mean not any Orthodox leaning. On the holidays, he went to the synagogue. Also, Friday night, he usually went to the synagogue for the Shabbat service. And this was going on as far as was possible.
Did you keep a kosher home? Did you observe kashrut?
Yes, the home was kept kosher. Certain rules were observed, and yes, we had separate dishes for the meat dishes and separate for the milk dishes. Right, and for the Passover, there was another set of dishes that was stored up in the attic and had to be changed then at Passover time.
What was the name of the shul where your family went to worship?
Well, it was about 1 kilometer from our house, roughly, and the name was Bet Yaakov.
Do you remember the name of the rabbi?
No, I do not remember the name of the rabbi, and as far as I can remember, the rabbi, well, either as they became older or for some other reason, have changed. I remember several different rabbis. I don't know the details, but
Okay. How many synagogues were there in Drahovich?
exactly I couldn't tell. There was about 15,000 Jews in Drahovich, living in Drahovich. There was the main synagogue, and there were synagogues scattered here and there. I know of about, besides the main synagogue, of about four synagogues, but I'm sure there were other smaller places where not everybody from the 15,000 was observant Jew went to the synagogue, but I believe that there was, I don't think on high holy days that people would go to the Yom Kippur service, to the Kol Nidre service.
How did you celebrate the Jewish holidays in your home?
Well, Passover was Passover. There was no bread. It was all matzah and Passover setup. As I mentioned already, meat dishes and milk dishes did not mix. I would say that, well, that's the extent, I would think.
Did you celebrate Hanukkah and
Oh yes, well,
Purim?
you reminded me, yes, as young kids, Hanukkah was a feast of the light, and the kids got presents. Also Purim was the same way observed. The high holidays, kids also went to the synagogue, and we were observant in that way.
Can you describe for me your Jewish education before the war?
Well, I did not go to any Jewish school in that sense, in prayers and all that. There was my father hired a Chassid, learned Jew that was coming to our house. I don't remember, was it several times a week or every day, and teaching Ludwig and me prayers and the prayer from the prayer book.
Were you a bar mitzvah?
Yes, I was a bar mitzvah at 13.
Do you remember anything about your bar mitzvah?
Yes, I believe I remember the celebration at the synagogue. I had to get up and read a part of the Torah, and that's as far as I remember. You know, through those things that happened during the war, many of those memories and many of these recollections sort of you lost touch with that, and all those horrible things that happened during the war had the bearing on the attitude, my bearing, the attitude towards the religion and whatever it meant to me.
Okay, but let's come back now before the war again. And let me ask you if your family belonged to any religious group or if you belonged to any religious group.
Well, the family, meaning the parents, for the parents I can say no. They were busy with their family life or the professional life. Professionally, I mean, tending the store. But my both brothers and the sister belonged to Zionist youth organizations and went to different affairs, for some dancing, but they were also political meetings, rallies, and all that.
Did you go too?
Yes, I was a youngster, but I was going with Ludwig to different things. Should I mention maybe now that while this was on, that in that Zionist organization, which was called Zeivia, after Zeev Jabotinsky, I remember that Menachem Begin came to Drohobych. He's originally from Poland. Came to Drohobych and held speeches all the different Jewish places, and of course visited us, our Zeivia. And I recollect him, as a matter of fact, his wife came from Drohobych. She was a Jewish woman from Drohobych. He got to know and married.
Were you very impressed by him when you were a young boy?
Well, yes, I was still a youngster and did not know all the different relation and different things, but it was somebody that was important, and he impressed many people, and I could feel that and see it.
What kind of teenager were you? After your bar mitzvah, when you got into your teens, what were you like?
Well, after the grade school, I went to the gymnasium. And gymnasium, maybe I should mention this because in Poland there were a limited number of Jewish students admitted to, not only to universities, but also even to gymnasias. So you had to pass examination. And I did pass examination at the state gymnasium in Drohobych, but passed but not accepted for lack of place was the official explanation. So consequently, my parents wanted me to go to gymnasium, and I went to a private gymnasium, which was a Jewish gymnasium. It means Jewish as a name. We learned the same thing and the same language as the state gymnasium and the Polish gymnasium, the Ukrainian gymnasium. There was maybe a little more emphasis on the religious hour. That was several times a week. But it was basically where in the Jewish gymnasium were also non-Jewish boys and girls. Well, so answering your question, how did I spend my time as a youth, as a schoolboy? Well, it was pleasant. Going to school, it wasn't just in the neighborhood. I had to walk like 4 kilometers every day, each way. So it took a little time, summer and winter, during the summer vacation, of course, summertime, we didn't, but warm weather and cold weather, snow or rain, I had to walk there. So that took a little time. Relation was good between school kids, and also because it was a co-educational school, so there were boys and girls, and being as it is usual between people, so they would find your own somebody that you cared about, and when we after school towards the evening went out again to the city to go walking on the Corso, we would pass each other, and the girl that I have a picture that did not survive the war, when we met, we both blushed. It was so. Anyway, that's the thing. We played soccer, we played volleyball, even in our own backyard. Often we played ping pong, we played hockey. In wintertime, it was when winter started in that area, in Drohobych. It started at the beginning of December and lasted through March. So it was frosty all the time. Well, there was an exception where the frost would let go. So we poured water and created ice skating arena. We played hockey there. So between the sports and the social events, family life, of course, it was a happy life.
As a young person, what were your goals looking toward the future?
Well, the possibilities were limited, but we were doing relatively well financially, so everybody was trying to, the parents were trying to get to all the kids as far as it was possible. My sister got married to, I start with the sister because then I come to the three boys in the family. My sister married a young man from a neighboring city, Stry, who studied medicine, but because being Jewish, he could not study in Poland, which had a numerus clausus.
At what time? What year was this?
This was, they came back from the studies just before the war started, in 1939. And so my sister went to Italy with him, and she spent, after graduating from a secretarial school, she got married, and they went to Italy, and my father supported them. My oldest brother also ended at trade school, and this was then a problem getting a job.
And your younger brother?
My younger brother, Ludwig, first went to the technical high school. First went to the regular gymnasium, and then he changed to the technical high school, trying then to go into engineering, and of course this did not transpire.
Took our tape break. You were telling me about your brothers and your sister and what they did after school. But I had asked you what your aspirations were, and I don't think that we ever heard what you wanted to do.
Right. Well, my schooling was till the outbreak of the war in 1939 in the grade school, and 4 classes of gymnasium. And then in 1941, as the Germans, I should mention this, when the Soviets marched in, Drohobych was first occupied by the German army, which stayed there for 1 week and then retreated and surrendered these territories to the Russians, to the Soviet army, according to the agreement between Ribbentrop and Molotov, Hitler and Stalin. So in other words, we were a part of the Soviet Union between 1939 and 41, till the outbreak of the German-Russian War.
And at that point in time, were your goals changed? Did you have a need to change the way you thought about what you were going to do with your life after school?
Well, of course, the school system has changed a little bit. We have, in the Soviet Union, there were 10 classes of of the school that included also the middle education and what's called here in America high school. So in other words, the last 2 years after the four classes of gymnasium, where I finished my middle education by completing the 2 classes under the Soviet system, which included there were teachers from Russia there, the Russian language. Certain subjects were dropped, like religion, this was dropped. Latin was dropped. Latin was a normal, not a foreign language. It was part of the curriculum of middle education in gymnasium. So as a matter of fact, I do have a picture of my class with the director of the gymnasium. He was our Latin teacher.
When the Russians came to Drohobych, were the Jews still allowed to enjoy Jewish culture in the city?
Yes, I must say that the Russians did not, in no way made any difference between being Jewish and not being Jewish, with the exception that Zionist movements were illegal and were politically just excluded, not only excluded, were forbidden. But other than that, as a matter of fact, the Russians, maybe the communists, not the Russians, but the communists, made a point to point out that there is no difference between Jews and Gentiles, that there should be no discrimination, it's forbidden, and all that. Yes.
Then if they made it a point that there should be no discrimination, did you find among your neighbors and your friends any discrimination, any anti-Semitism?
I find, as far as I can recollect, I never really encountered any anti-Semitic problems, with the exception of once in grade school, but I don't think it was an altercation between boys. Being jabbed with a pencil in the row of benches that we were sitting by a boy that sort of didn't care, didn't like me, or whatever. But other than this, it was jabbed, I say, it was nothing serious. It was just a small little incident.
So while the Russians were in Drohobych, what was life like for the Jews?
Well, as I mentioned, actually, synagogues and religious life, they did not forbid, they did not encourage it also. And people were, well, there was much less emphasis among Jews on the religious side of it. And so consequently, Jewish life was not as, should I say, omnipresent or among Jews or as it was before.
While the Russians were in your hometown, were you aware of what was happening in Germany with the rise of the Third Reich?
Of course, yes, I certainly was aware of it. We were aware what's happening in Germany, in Austria, in occupied Poland. Hitler came to power in 1933. I remember vividly listening on the radio what the political rallies and that were going on in Germany when they attacked, I say, Anschluss is called in German, of Austria. Hitler originally came from Austria, from Braunau, and how the Viennese gave him a welcome and all this. In fact, the Austrians were, generally speaking, much more anti-Semitic and Nazi supporters than capita than the Germans were. So the question was,
Were you aware what was happening?
right, certainly. Many Jews from the western part of Poland that was occupied by Germans wanted to escape the persecutions and the physical existence, being threatened, escaped over the border from occupied Poland by the Germans to the Soviet side, to the part of Poland that was occupied by the Soviet. And of course, with horrible tales and all that. We did know, however, what was happening.
Did you discuss the situation with your family?
Well, of course, everybody in the family, me being the youngest, and I knew it, so everybody in the family was aware of it. I would say also, should I already, well, maybe I should mention it, that when the Germans attacked the Soviet Union, within a week they were in Drohobych, and prior to the withdrawal of the Soviets and the occupation by the Germans, I was trying to escape into Russia. And on a train that was freight train, many people got into the train, and as we drove rode east, we were strafed and bombed by German planes already, because this was already the first week or a few days after the German attack.
What
And
year?
I beg your pardon?
What year?
1941. And I tried to escape. I was the one from the family that tried to escape and didn't go very far. Next city was Stryj, Stryj. And I did not escape very far because of the attacks by the German Luftwaffe. I simply got off with some distant members of the family, cousins, and this was the brother of my brother-in-law. He was living in Stryj, so we tried to escape to Stryj and then on to Russia. But because of the strafing and bombing, we did not go very far. We interrupted our journey, and the Germans came within a week, occupied Drohobych and Stryj.
And after the Germans arrived in your town, what changes did you notice?
I wasn't present in Drohobych when the Germans came in because I was in Stryj. We were in hiding for a few days, and then...
Where did you hide?
I was with this man that I mentioned, brother of my brother-in-law, in a cellar someplace with his parents. And during that time, the Germans gave free hand to the Ukrainians to make a pogrom. The Germans simply, even encouraged, of course, but did not interfere at all. And the Ukrainians were murdering Jewish people. I did say something nice about the Ukrainians, and generally speaking, there was few nice things that one could say. And this is a bad thing that happened. My father was well liked in the neighborhood by the Ukrainians, by the Gentiles in general. And I wasn't home, I was in Stryj. He was cornered and chased into that stream. They wanted to drown him, force him into the thing. Some hooligans, Ukrainian. Well, somehow or other, some others came and sort of rescued him and all that. So it ended just that he was just attacked and subjected to all this thing. This was survived. Then he survived. I came a few days afterwards back to Drohobych.
How did your family react when they saw you again?
Well, of course, they were astonished, but they were most happy to have me back and all that. I must say also that Ludwig was not home because Ludwig was at the age, Ludwig, my second brother, he was at the age that he was drafted into the Russian army, to the Soviet army, in 1940. So he finished then his schooling and went into the army, and he was sent deep into Russia to a city called Kursk. And of course, the contact was in the beginning when the Russians were still in Drohobych. We had contact with him. He sent letters, and letters were sent to him. But it was soon after the war broke out that, of course, the contacts were broken off. And in the Soviet Union, the ex-Polish citizens that were in the Soviet army were discharged because, according to the agreement between the exiled Polish government and the Soviet government, they were going to put up Polish battalions in Russia, in the Soviet Union. So on that basis, my brother was discharged from the army, but for some reason or other, he did not join the Polish army, and he spent his years of the war deep in Kazakhstan, where he married also and came back to Poland in 1947.
Let's go back to you, returning to Drohobych after the pogrom. Were there other pogroms in your hometown when you returned, after the Germans had started occupying Drohobych?
Right. This was the only pogrom, what you call pogrom. Then the Germans took over, made part of their policy to eliminate Jews. Action was started, one and the second, and so on and so forth, till all the Jews that were not working in the refineries, petroleum refineries in the area, all the Jews were eliminated.
Can you give me any dates and details about those actions?
Well, my father, for example, perished relatively very soon after the occupation. It was in November 1941. The war started in June of 1941, and he suffered from asthma, so he wasn't able to work hard, and so these people were selected for one of the first action, and he received a notice to appear on Friday evening, to appear next Saturday morning at the labor office, and according to what was related to us then, by people that saw, by Gentiles that saw, that these people were loaded on trucks and taken to the forest of Bronica, which was about 10 kilometers from Drohobych, and executed in a mass grave.
When the people told you about this, what was their reaction? Did they witness this action?
Well, nobody witnessed the action. It was deep in the forest that the Germans did that. Germans with the large help of the Ukrainians, militia. No, nobody witnessed it, but people have seen these trucks with Jews and Ukrainian militiamen standing with a rifle in the corner of at the platform there, and these people were set down. I mean, had to sit down on the floor, and that was couldn't be misunderstood. This was taking them to and going into that direction. So it was well known that this was the purpose of killing these people.
Did this happen often in your town?
Yes, it happened. It happened in the beginning very often. Then the Germans still didn't use the mass destruction technique of using gas, Cyclone B or whatever methods to gas people. So yes, it was several, I would say maybe 4 or 5 Aktionen that people were taken to.
Were you ever involved in an Aktion?
Well, in the selection, in other words, the Ukrainian and the Germans came to the place, for example, where I worked, and selected older people and people in hiding also they found, and took them off.
How did you avoid?
I as a young man, still a youngster, able to work, escaped that. Simply, they didn't take me.
Did you ever have to go into hiding to avoid being picked up for an Aktion?
Yes, in general, yes, I was in the hiding. But basically, until I was just before the end of that war, the end of the German occupation, I was working. And those people that worked for the Germans, for the German industries, were sort of protected because they wanted that labor, that slave labor. So that kept me, alive.
Where did you work? What did you do?
All right. In the beginning, I worked, still living in a house, at various jobs, but one of the main jobs at that time was working for the Gestapo. And that is, they forced me to, they built a riding academy, horse riding academy, and used Polish people, professional people like bricklayers and carpenters and all that. And us young Jews, as slave labor, the Poles were paid to help, to mix the mortar, to bring it to the job site and so on and so forth, all these different things. So...
The Poles were paid. Were you?
No, we were not paid. We were not even given food. And many a times a Gestapo man would come around and didn't like somebody and would pull out his pistol and just shoot him, just like a dog. He would do it with dogs also, and would do it to Jewish guys. Right.
And you witnessed this many times?
Yes, several times I did. So this was the first job that I had. And
How long did you work making this riding stable?
Well...
And what did you do?
Well, I was a bricklayer's helper, a plasterer's helper also. How long? Would have been several months during the summer months.
The summer of 1941.
1941, right. I then tried to get away from the surrounding of working for the Gestapo, seeing the Gestapo people, at every hour, 10 times or so, So I found out that at the outlying area there were a German major of the Wehrmacht, of the German army, who had a feeling for the Jews, and he organized gardens at a place called Hiravka, which was a settlement, I would say, near Drohobych, or within an hour and a half walking distance. So I did walk every morning, so I quit going to Gestapo, the riding academy, and transferred there. The atmosphere of that job was altogether different. However, we were also visited often by the Ukrainian militia and the Gestapo people also. But
what happened when they came?
Well, they came to inspect, to see that everything was according to what they wanted it to be, and that people worked, and it was their job to supervise, to see that we are cruelly handled. But Helmrich was a good guy.
What was his name?
His name was Major, I don't remember the first name, Helmrich. Helmrich. He saw to it that as many Jews as he could employ there had the employment. But
How many were there?
I would say roughly, in my estimation, about close to 1,000. There were men and women working, young women especially. And I got to know my neighbor, I mean not next door neighbor, but somebody also worked there, which I later went in hiding with her. And her name was Edja Birnbaum. Okay, so let me revert again to, we walked every morning to work and then back to work. This went on for a little while, and then a camp was built there, and we could stay overnight there. But being that Gärtnerei, which in German means gardens, was not essential to the German war machine, so it wasn't a very safe place to stay. The Germans were going to get to these people first, the inactive, the older, the sick, and then the not essential jobs. I got some wind of it, and they liquidated finally the camp, took these people also to Bronica to be shot. But prior to this, about a week or so, I got some wind. There was something in the air, you know, that you could feel. And I changed, left the Ravka camp and went to a place which was producing roof tiles and bricks, and that was called, from a Polish name, Dachowczarnia. And there I worked about 2 to 3 months.
And when was this?
This was late summer or early fall of 1941 into 42.
What did you do there?
Well, just mixing lime, you know, and preparing work for forming of the tiles and all that. It was, I mean, you didn't have to be a professional there you were shown what to do and you had to do that.
Were you free then to decide that you wanted to leave one labor camp and work in another?
Right, relatively so, because the camps were not guarded. They were simply put up by the management to facilitate so that people had more hours to work and not come and go.
When you were in Dachowczarnia, where did you stay? You said you were making tiles and bricks. Where did you stay when you were working there?
Well, I would have to make a little correction that actually Dachowczarnia, I did go home after work. There was no barracks at Dachowczarnia, so they allowed people to go home from Hrabka. They then finally organized a place to stay for the people. Dachowczarnia did not have that.
Okay, so you went back to your family home
Right.
each day?
Right,
And how long did you stay in your family home?
just overnight.
For this entire period that you were in Dachowczarnia?
Right,
Until the end of 42?
roughly so, right.
Now, when were people, Jewish people in Drohobych, were they allowed to remain in their homes? When was the ghetto created?
Well, this was still before the liquidation of the ghetto. Several Aktionen happened during that time, but Jews still lived in the ghetto. It was before the liquidation. I do want to say also that when we were moved to the ghetto, prior to it, the Jews were uh, called on to surrender jewelry, gold, and furs to the collection points the Germans established. And I remember my mother and father wasn't alive anymore, and my sister went and brought these things there, what we possessed.
Did they give everything, or did they save some things?
No, I believe that this was just before the ghetto started, just before the ghetto started, right? We were told to leave our house. So I believe they didn't want to jeopardize anything, and they've surrendered all they had.
So while you were in the labor camp, you lived with your family and worked during the day.
Only as far as Dachowczarnia is concerned. Because I moved out of Dachowczarnia to another camp that was more essential to the German war industry, and there you felt safer.
To start this tape by clarifying something that I didn't understand at the end of the last tape, if we may. Let's go back to Dachowczarnia, to the end of your experience at that camp. While you were in Dachowczarnia, you were telling me you still lived in your family home. What happened to that house and to your family's living quarters during this period while you were working in Dachowczarnia?
Well, they were trying to dispossess Jews of their properties, and also leave these places and move into the first Jewish assigned areas before they formed a strict ghetto. Okay, so during that time, we left the house, and my mother, my sister, my oldest brother, and I were coming home from work, and that was the terrain, this was the place that was incorporated into the ghetto.
How far was that from your actual family home?
Well, we lived at the outskirts of the city, and this was close to the center of the city, near the great synagogue.
Were all the Jews of Drohobych forced to live in the same area?
Yes. In the beginning, there were two areas where the Jews were assigned to the Jews. Then, as the Aktion progressed, and less Jews were, so they cut down the size and liquidated one of the areas there altogether.
And then there was only one remaining section.
Right.
And you spoke of more actions. Was anyone in your family involved in any actions at this time?
Yes. After my father perished, my mother, we all children, had our jobs. My sister, my oldest brother, and I. During the day, we would go out of the house and go to work. So we were not during the day at home, but mother was home. And this is when an action that lasted over several weeks, they were taking Jewish people and taking them to the courthouse where they kept them till they had enough people to form a transport. And this was already not a transport for mass executions, but this was a transport that was sent to Belzec, where there was a Vernichtungslager, which means a death camp, where they killed people by using exhaust fumes. in those chambers.
How
And
many,
there my mother went.
how
She was
many,
taken.
how did you find out that she was taken during that action?
Well, the action lasted lasted 4 weeks, I would think. And of course, you know, this was a common knowledge. You came home, mother wasn't there. Where was she? So even the neighbors would say she was taken away.
Did anyone actually see her go on the transport?
Well, yes, yes. When they had enough people and took them, marched them to the train station, it was a column escorted by the police, and as she passed Strijska ulica, which was the street leading to the main railway station, she waved to some people that lived in that house, you know, from before the war even. She like waved and indicated that she should, this woman should tell these people what's happening to her. So, yes, I found out that she was in that thing, in that action taken.
And that was at the end of the summer of 42?
Right.
And then what happened?
Well, then I did work at Dakovcharnia, and I felt that, as I mentioned already, that Dakovcharnia was an essential to the German war machine efforts, and I found out that at a place called Frymeta, do I spell it? Frymeta, Frymeta, that there was a, this was a part of the complex of refineries, petroleum refineries, that were in Drohobych, and the Germans formed a company called, in German, Karpaten, which was Carpathian, the mountains, Karpatenöl, which is oil, Gesellschaft, company. Well, and Frymeta was a part of it, that the trucks and cars of the company were serviced there, cleaned, repaired, and so on and so forth. So I came one day, the guy that was in charge of Frymeta, his name was Karl Leschmann. I found out that he lived in Mannheim, Germany, Mannheim. And he saw me and he asked me, what am I looking for? So I said, I'm looking for a job. He asked me, what can I do? I said, I worked as a bricklayer, and first bricklayer's airport and bricklayer. So bricklayer and plasterer, bricklayers know also plastering. I did actually not learn plastering. So he gave me a job, just trying to see how well I do. There was a hole in the ceiling, and he asked me to make a little mortar and plastered it up and patch it up. Of course, not being a professional, I thought that you take regular mortar like you take for bricklaying and simply take the trowel and apply it, which I had a good sort of way to do it, I mean, from ping pong even. So I mixed up mortar, but made a mistake and didn't realize it, that it isn't that mortar, that thickness of the mortar that is used in bricklaying. It has to be very loose mortar and applied in several layers that would stick to it. My thing was I dug into this mortar and threw it up. And of course it didn't take very long. I think while he was standing and witnessing this, and others, and the thing just came down. So it was embarrassing to me, and he realized that, well, a fine bricklayer you are, fine plasterer. But nevertheless, this was a decent guy, and I was young, and sort of he liked what he saw. So he said, well, I get a job. I'll be cleaning cars. And so he called the guy in charge of that car cleaning part of it and told me to take care of me and to give me an assignment.
Also with the Carpathian Oil Company.
Right, at Fremeta.
So what did you do while you were working for car maintenance?
Well, cleaning means mainly cleaning cars. They were greased, so you had to, we weren't driving it out or anything else. There were Poles and Ukrainians employed there. We were the helpers, and also, well, I shouldn't say that, we were, some people, some Jews serviced the car. In other words, greased it and changed oil. And my job was strictly cleaning the car and also patching up the roof. And
how did the Ukrainians and the Poles treat the Jews in this company when you were there as a laborer?
well, indifferent, I'd say. They whether helped nor hindered us. I would say that Fremeta, which is a part of this company, Carpathian Oil Company, was created then, Leshman created there a barrack for the Jews to live on and not to walk to Jagiellońska in the morning and come to walk from Jagiellońska in the morning to Fremeta for work and in the evening back.
You hadn't mentioned Jagiellońska before. Would you clarify that for me, please?
Jagiellońska was the main camp of all the Jewish workers of the various, and there were about 4 or 5 petroleum refineries in Drohobych. Borislav, a town next to it, was the place where, and the area where the refinery, where the wells, the petroleum wells were, where it was dug up from the ground, it was brought up from the ground, and in Drohobych were the refineries. So Drohobych was the main place. There was a camp also in Borislav where they employed Jews, and this helped really for the about 4,000 Jews to survive till the summer of 44. I'm a little ahead of myself. Till 44, till the Russian front neared again Drohobych from the east, and I did not mention that name, but it's an important name. The chief of the refineries was a German by the name Bertolt Beitz, B-E-I-T-Z, Beitz. This guy was well recognized and awarded also recognition and even by the Polish government, by various Jewish, Israeli places, Bertolt Beitz. I do want to mention something in connection with, I'm speaking about the German supervision, that the guy Helmrich, Major Helmrich from Heravka, he married a Jewish woman after the war, and when he died, in Yad Vashem in Israel, they put up a tree in memory of his memory. So Kurt Leshman in Drohobych, Major Helmrich, and Bertolt Beitz were the guys that contributed to that Jews could survive till the 1940. There were Judenrein, which means no Jews present at Lvov and Stry and Sambor and all the area of the thing, outside of Krakow and Warsaw, of course, due to the fact that these Germans could say that they need these Jews to produce the war-needed petroleum for the thing, And these experts would be necessary to do that.
So during this period, in Fermata, you worked during the day, and you felt protected by the job that you had.
Right.
What did you do in the evening in Fermata?
Well, Leshman was such a decent guy. We knew that in the end, the aim of the Germans is to exterminate all the Jews. So when the front neared, we would figure, well, the turn would come on us again. Our turn would come. So we were trying to do something. Either hide someplace, or we dug a bunker on Fermata under one of the buildings that wasn't used, unused building, under the concrete floor. And we worked at night, dug the thing, and with pails, hauled the dirt out and dumped it into the river, right adjoining there. While Leshman looked away, he had inkling that we are doing there, and some Ukrainians, workers, and maybe intimated to him that something is going on there, but he looked away. And being that he looked away, they were stuck to the job, so to say, and didn't want to do anything to expose us. That would put Leshman in trouble. So they just kept mum. And so our occupation after work, well, we had to go whole food. I mean, so where was the food? Not too far was another a big refinery, Polmin, called Polmin, Polish Minerals, Polmin. And there at noontime and in the evening, 2 or 3 guys from our crew went with pails and brought food. So it was that this was also done at the time. And what else did we do? Well, we worked long hours, of course. And as I say, we were digging that tunnel there, that bunker there. And
How large a bunker was it?
well, it could accommodate about 30 to 40 people.
How long did it take you to build?
Well, it was dug and dug and dug. It seemed like endlessly. It took several months, I would say, to dig that.
How many people worked on it?
Well, everybody that was able-bodied, and they were all able-bodied people, because otherwise they wouldn't work there, where everybody contributed. In other words, there was a turn, you worked 2 hours or 3 hours, couldn't work in the dark and in that hole, and that for very many hours. So you had to change. So and pass it on. I mean, in other words, a guy was digging, somebody else would take that pail and bring it, and somebody would lift it up, and another guy would hold it to a certain amount, and the other guy would dump it in the river.
How long were you able to stay in Fermata?
Well, in Fermata I stayed for a number of weeks, and that at one point, I decided, and rumors were going around that the front is nearing Drohobych, that soon the Russians would move in, the Germans would leave, so I thought that the thing would be liquidated, like other places were liquidated. And I simply went out to our neighbor, where we lived before the war, our house, a Ukrainian woman, and asked her if she would agree to hide me while we waiting for the Russian front to come in. And she did agree. So
Did you go directly to her house, or did you have to continue working at the labor camp?
No, I went back, and in hiding was the girl that I used to walk to, Heravka Eja Birnbaum. She was hiding, and we had some wife and some family members were hiding behind a paneled wall, while we were working. Nobody bothered them. The Gestapo didn't come in there. They came and they didn't suspect that at the Fremeta camp there would be some like this. People would be hiding.
So you were in hiding while you were still working
No,
in the
no,
labor
no.
camp?
I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about Eja Birnbaum and wives and maybe younger. No, there were no young children. Family members, wives mainly, of other Jewish workers there.
Okay, where were you living at this time, though?
At that barrack had a back wall, like a wall here, paneled wall, that you could take one of the panels out, a small panel, and somebody could slide in there.
Okay.
Right. This was while we were working there. Also, while the work on that bunker was going on. I did go to the Ukrainian woman, as I mentioned, and she agreed to it, and I told her that I have a girl friend with me, and so she knew about Eja. A day or two later in the evening, we slipped out of the Fremeta camp and went to hide there. And we were there for 2 weeks. And the war was not, the front did not move closer. The Russians held the attacks for military reason, whatever. And being that it protracted, our hiding there was stretched out, and the woman was getting nervous and sort of then said, well, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to keep you here any longer, with the best of my will even. I'll have to ask you to leave here. While we were hiding, the Jews out of Drohobych from the last camps were taken out and taken not to the execution place. They were taken to Borislav, where there were a collection point. They were trying to collect about 1,000 people to send them off to real concentration camp. These were forced labor camps that we're talking about. Real concentration camp, the first one was Plaszów near Krakow.
But at that time, that some people were being taken to Borislav, you were still in hiding.
Yes, I was still in hiding, and while I was in hiding, the SS or the Gestapo came, and the camp was liquidated. The factory was, the repair place, the car repair place, was liquidated. Was because the front was moving closer. So they have decided, the Gestapo decided that, well, that has to be, the Jews have to disappear. And people got wind of it in the camp, and slid into the camp, into the bunker. And soon they were denounced by the Ukrainian people, some guys, and the Gestapo came and threw a grenade. They shot into the thing and threw in a grenade there and hollered to come out. And some people came out. I have an acquaintance of mine that was with his father. I mean, a guy, two brothers in New York.
Their names? Do you know their names?
Marian Zellinger and Lou Zellinger. That's his nickname, Lou, rather. He was Leonard or something like that. And their father, Zelinger, I don't remember his first name, also survived the war.
And they were in this bunker?
They were in this bunker, so when Marian came out, so they said to the Gestapo say, are there more people there? And they send him back to the bunker to tell the other people to come out. And this younger brother and father's Marian told me that were still in there, and Marian went instead of telling him, so he barricaded them, pushed some dirt and some, I don't know, concrete pieces and all that, and didn't come out. But they had sniff dogs, I don't know the details anyway, everybody came out and they sent them all to Borislav, to the collection point for Plaszów. They didn't execute these people, they've taken them. This was already 44, and the
And where
Germans,
were you when this happened?
while I was at the Ukrainian basement of the Ukrainian woman, this happened. Well, so what happened was she told us that she couldn't put us up anymore, gave us a bottle of milk and a loaf of bread, and sent us off. And rumors, the Ukrainians and the Poles knew that these people were not shot, liquidated, or whatever you want to name it, but taken to Borislav, and with the first transport, which included people from Jagiellońska, from the main camp, from Frimeta, and from people in hiding that were discovered or whatever. With the first transport, I believe it must have been in May of 1944, or maybe, in May, because I was in June, with the second transport. In May they were transported by train a freight train to Plaszów.
Let's go back to you, though, not the first transport, but to you. What did you do when the neighbor woman who allowed you to
Right.
stay in her cellar said that you couldn't stay there any longer?
Right, she told us also that the bunker was cleared of people. So in my mind, I had not much choice. Where do I go? To go into the woods? I mean, the Ukrainians and the Poles less, but the Ukrainians if they find us, they'll catch us and kill us, or hand us over to the Germans. So I didn't have much choice. So being that the bunker was discovered already, so I figured, well, if we go there, we have a loaf of bread and see how long it will last. And we were sitting there for several days, smeared, all greased, from the earth. And
How many were in the bunker at this point?
No, just Edja and I.
Okay, just the two of you.
Right. At night, I came out of the bunker when the milk was ended, and there was a pool of water at the refinery there, and I slid there at night and put the bottle of water into the pool, and while I had my hand with that thing there, I looked around, looked towards the barracks where we lived while working there, and I saw a German soldier patrolling, sort of back and forth, walking back and forth, with a carbine here on his shoulder, on a strap leg. So I momentarily figured, gee, what is happening? And I saw then, of course, that he walked, it was dark. At night he did not see me, but I saw him. So I immediately just stopped my breath and turned around and started sliding, back and forth, all four, towards the bunker. I got there, told Edja about it, and I said, well, we'll have to leave just before the daybreak. We'll have to leave. So it was really that before it got light, we slid out of the bunker, decided to go along the river skirting Drohobych to Borislav. but we didn't go very far. At the outskirts of the other side of the town, we were caught by a German policeman patrolling also another refinery there. And we were hauled by him to the front gate of the refinery and given over to the guy that was on duty there as Jews. He immediately saw us smeared and all that, two individuals, and said, "Juden," yeah. And he threatened us, "I'll shoot you guys," and all that. But let me first take you to the, and he escorted us into the front gate, and we were put up there, sort of stood, under guard. And while the daylight came on, the farmers from the neighboring villages were going with their produce into the town, and among them was a acquaintance of mine who indicated that he would, that at the Gestapo there are some Jews that are holding there, and for transferring them to Borislav.
Ended our last tape, Mr. Davis was telling me about being caught by the river after he escaped from the bunker, and he's now at the Carpathian Oil Company. Would you continue from there, please, Mr.
Right.
Davis?
We were there, and as I mentioned, somebody that I knew and knew, the guy knew me, was among the peasants that were coming to the city with their produce. So these people were close to, they were on the streets. We were a little in the depth of the gate. Excuse me a minute. So what happened, I asked the German Wachmann, which was the guy on the duty there, if he would allow me and buy some milk from the peasant. So the guard changed every hour or so, I don't remember, hour or 2 hours. Every hour another guy would come to guard the entrance. So the one was very cruel, and he said, "We would shoot, if I would have my way, I would shoot you momentarily." This other guy was more decent, and he allowed me to go to the crowd, to the people. We were sort of expose, like, some to look at it, two Jews all of a sudden. They were not Jews supposed to be there. So I went there, and I asked him if he had some money with me. I don't remember, I had some money. And I gave him some money, one of this guy, and he said to me, "If you can get away, go hide in the fields." This was summer, right? "I'll bring you some food and all that." But anyway, he said, "They won't hurt you. They are taking people to the collection camp in Borislav for transport to Plaszów." And it was already, the Germans had some second thoughts, the Nazis had some second thoughts about extinguishing Jews all over the place. And they were sort of trying to scale it down, at least to take it to the camp, away from the civilian population. Anyway, the guy told me that a certain guy that the Gestapo allowed to walk without the armband, and he was their trusted Jew, so to say. He was allowed to walk between the different refineries, and he was their man. Not that he was the Jew, he was not bad to the Jews, because there were some people that denounced and hiding place and all that. No, he was helpful to the Jews.
What was his name?
His name was Naftali Tulek called first name Bakkenroth. Should I spell it? Bakkenroth. Tulek Bakkenroth. Tulek. Okay, and so this guy that I gave money to buy milk for us, he went to the Gestapo to see Bakkenroth and to tell him about us. Sure enough, after an hour or so, Bakkenroth and a Ukrainian militiaman appeared there and escorted us to the Gestapo headquarters in Drohobych.
And was that safe, going to the Gestapo headquarters?
Well, first of all, we had no choice. It's one thing. But another thing is, yes, the Gestapo collected Jews to turn them over to the collection point in Borislav for the transport to Plaszów. Right, so it was our only chance, but besides this, what else? The other alternative that they would shoot us. So, anyway, we were taken to the Gestapo, stayed there, I believe, that day and the following day. And the third day we were taken by truck with another 2 or 3 Jews that were in hiding and they were discovered, taken to Borislav to the collection point.
Before you left the Gestapo, what happened while you were there? Did they interrogate you?
No. No, this Gestapo did not interrogate us. They simply, we were put in cells there in the basement, just held for the day or two. No, we were not interrogated.
And how were you treated while you were in the cells?
Well, we were just locked up there without food.
So then they took you with these other people to Borislav.
Right.
Could you describe Borislav for me?
Borislav was a camp before Jews were liquidated in general, also connected with the oil industry, so they kept a certain amount of Jews, like in Drohobych, they kept for into the 1944, and when the front was moving closer, they transported, like from Drohobych and Borislav, in fact, they combined the Jews to form a transport. I believe it was so, to send these people to Krakow, which was a day's ride, you know.
So how long were you in this collection point, this Borislav?
The collection point, I would say, in the collection point, we were not just kept there. We were taken every morning to work, you know, doing various kinds of work in the area, and
what did
evening
you do?
back. Well, this is a valid question that I can hardly recollect now. What did we do? This was like going on for 6 weeks. Third work, I don't know, I don't remember. Forced work, I mean, just artificial things to just to keep us, you know, steady going. After 6 weeks, they have organized, they had enough Jews. Oh, I should mention this. Every morning and every evening there was an appel. Appel is a count, head count, and we had to be present. The names or the numbers were of the prisoner or the people were read, and everybody had to respond. And one day in the evening at the Appel Platz, they brought 2 Jews that were caught escaping, and they wanted to serve as a lesson to us Jews present there, assembled in that square. And they brought these 2 people, prisoners, and 2 Menzinger was one Gestapo SS man, and another one was Schönhaupt or Schönberg, I don't recall the name exactly. They shot these two people in front of us. And people, I mean, women couldn't look at it, and all that was terrible. So I remember they shot him and walked away. And as they shot him in the back and the head, one wasn't dead and was still jerking, you know. So, well, because to end his suffering, so one Jew went to the guard there and said about it, and the Menzinger or the second guy came and gave him the Gnadenschuss, which means the last thing to shout, and shot him dead. Well, okay, going back to...
So there was a routine then in Borislav. Terrible incidents like this, but there was a routine with the appel every morning and in the evening.
Absolutely.
And you went to work. Where did you live?
In one of the buildings.
Okay, they had bunkers?
Not
or
not
barracks?
bunkers, not barracks. These were solid buildings. I don't know Borislav that well, and I could not recollect. I mean, I've been to Borislav once or twice in my life before, and I don't recall exactly where or how. I don't have a Drohobych, the camps and all that. Fine, it's still my mind, can always return to it. But Borislav, I hardly have recollection.
But you were there for about a month, you said.
Month to 6 weeks, something like that.
And then what?
Then they had enough Jews. One day in the morning, they surrounded the camp and hauled us to the railroad station in Borislav. And through Borislav was a dead-end point, for the line there, through Drohobych and on to Krakow.
What was the date?
The date was it was the month of June of 1944. I don't recall the exact day.
Did you know where you were going?
No, we did not know where we were going. Excuse me, I made a mistake. This wasn't that transport that I didn't know where we were going. We knew very well where we were going because they sent, even from the first transport, they sent 2 Jews to persuade other Jews in hiding, come out. Germany used that technique of taking Jews from the first transport that came to Plaszów to bring them back to Drohobych in order for them to spread the word that Jews are being treated that they're alive, that they are not liquidated. What I was thinking about when I mentioned that we didn't know where we were going was the transport from Plaszów to Mauthausen, which comes later.
Let's go back, though, to the
Right.
transport
I just got mixed up.
to Plaszów. I'm glad you clarified that for me. Thank you. So you were taken to Plaszów by train.
Right.
How many people were in your train?
Well, it's hard for me to tell for sure, but I would say maybe close to 1,000, several hundred people.
How many
More
people
than
in each
500.
car?
Again, I don't recollect detail like that. It was a day's trip. Towards the end of the day, we arrived at Plaszów.
When you arrived, what happened?
Yes, when we arrived at Plaszów, we were taken to what they called Entlausung, which is a bed. We had to strip naked, go through a shower, 2 showers there, and walk out the other side. We were, just a moment before we went into the bed, we were shaved off, the head and the body. Hair was taken off, and we were going through the bed, coming out the other side. We were given striped prisoner's garb and put into the cap and the shirt and maybe underwear, underpants, and then of course a jacket and
Were you
pants.
given a number?
Well, this wasn't the first day, but it was then. We were put in a quarantine, and yes, and we were given a number.
Do you remember your number?
No, I don't.
After you were deloused and were given your uniform, did anybody communicate with you in any way?
Well, I must tell you about this. We were in a quarantine, and there were prisoners there already, Jews that were there already, longer from other parts of the country and from other countries. So we were trying to get from the quarantine. We didn't get enough food. So I, like some others, also slipped out from the quarantine and into the other part of the camp. And between the barbed wire, I sort of slipped out and came into the open area there. And then I walked towards the place where there was some activity there. I was apparently, I didn't see that, by a guard discovered that something was moving. And immediately I heard loud noises, and I realized what's happening. And there was a latrine, toilet. I didn't go into the hall down, but in the shed, slid there. And I heard noises, and I heard a lot of rumor, a lot of things. They were looking and talk out loud, and between the Jewish police, the German SS, and it went on for about 15 to 20 minutes. And I don't know what, they did not come to that place. I heard them all around. They didn't have a sniffing dog, because that would have given me out. But just Providence was, anyway,
So they never found you
they
in
never
the
found
latrine.
me, but after the Germans gave up that thing, well, they figured the guy slid out and someplace. The Jewish policemen came and they were more thorough. And they have opened the door and saw me there. They didn't hand me over to the Germans, but took me to the quarantine back and got 25 of my behind. This was my punishment. They wanted to insert their authority and their importance, but they were decent enough not to turn me over, because there was a place of execution in the camp, in that Plaszow camp, where every morning they were taking and shooting people. So I had luck that they didn't do that to me.
Can you describe for me the camp?
Yes, the camp was surrounded by barbed wire, and it was divided into women's barracks, because Edja was also at that camp, in the women's barracks. And I, as I said, was there about 4 to 6 weeks, because as the Russians kept moving, they finally did, move to Drohobych and on west, Lvov and close to Krakow. And soon enough, he asked me to describe the camp. The camp, again, there was really no purpose for that camp. Probably Plaszow was also like in that film Schindler's List. Also, people were taken to a place that were enameling pots. So it wasn't so important for the German army. Maybe it was for the German army important, but it wasn't so important. Drohobych was more, the refineries in Drohobych were more important. Yes, it drew attention because the guy took out the Jews to do that. But in Drohobych really was that Bertolt Beitz influential also in saving us. So what I'm saying, the jobs that we did was were accidental jobs, were not jobs that were important to the war industry. We were just kept there because they wanted to save a number of Jews, not liquidate for the Allies when the war ends, that the Russian front was moving, but also in the West the front was moving. Italy was occupied already by the Allies. This was summer '44. There was an attempt on Hitler's life and all that. And we simply were just simply employed by, marched in, to different jobs, but nothing of a specific thing.
So what was your routine in the camp?
Well, appeared appel in the morning, and then being marched to, even outside the camp. I remember to Krakow, to different places of work. Simply dirt road, digging, I don't know.
What did the civilian population, how did they respond when they saw the Jews from the camp going among them?
Well, not among them. We were marched in a column to the thing, so I could not say that we did not mix with the crowd. We were sort of isolated from the civilian population, so we could not tell, what their attitude or what their reaction was. We were escorted each time we went someplace. Or at the job site there was a guard.
Did you have an opportunity to see Edja during the time that you were both in Plough?
No.
Did you meet anyone that you knew in this camp?
Again, the question is...
Did you meet anyone that you knew while you were in Plough?
Yes, the people from the first transport from Drohobych and so on, so forth. Yes, they were there.
And were you aware of the extermination facilities?
Well, we were aware from the very beginning that they are, killing Jews by various methods. Certainly, yes, we were aware. We knew that there is an Auschwitz concentration camp, Oświęcim, Polish. Yes, we knew. We knew that in Germany, even before the war, Dachau existed, and Sachsenhausen near Berlin, and other things like that. Yeah. I have forgotten to say something. The people that were discovered at the bunker at Frimeta, my brother was the oldest brother was among them. And as we were brought from the Gestapo in Drohobych to Borislav, to the collection camp, there I found my brother, Leon, there. I have forgotten to somehow didn't get into this conversation. So he was at the camp, brought there when they discovered the bunker, took these Jews and didn't do them wrong, but brought them to Borislav, to the collection camp. And I came there later, he was there, and we were together in the transport to Plough.
Oh, so you met your brother and were in Plough with your brother?
Right.
Did you work in the same place?
We did not work at a specific place. We were at various jobs, various
Right.
work.
Were you able to be together at all while you were in the camp?
Well, in the evening we saw each other, right, after work, right.
What were the conversations?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something else, that I mentioned money that I gave to that guy that went to see Buchenroth from that gate of the refinery. I'm stretching it out, but I think it's essential to know. Edja had still some gold bracelet or something that she somehow managed in Drohobych. And I had my sleeves rolled up and put it in my sleeve. And as I approached this guy about the milk and notifying Beckenrod about it, I gave him that bracelet. Bracelet, maybe something else, a gold watch maybe. There was edges. I don't know, Jews were supposed to surrender. Apparently some, had some thoughts or dug it in the ground and somehow it got back. So in Drohobych there was no problem to keep that, in hiding. But as we came to Plaszów, just a moment, right, as we came to Boryslav, I told about this to my brother Leon. And he dared one day not to go to work, but to go from that column from work and walk to Drohobych to see this guy, and the guy returned to him that gold. Right. And he returned to him this gold and suggested to him that we come back. So Leon came back in the evening with that gold. And we gave it to me, and I just knew about it. And when we arrived in Plaszów, we had to leave everything on us, naked, stripped, going to, so it was left there. So that was a sort of a daredevil thing to leave the job site, and walk this 11 kilometers in the morning and hide during the height of the day, and then in the evening slide back into the camp.
What was your health like while you were in the camps?
Well, I was okay. Young, and I could take a lot of punishment. So
you were in Plaszów from June 22nd, 1944,
till September.
until September. And then what happened? Where did you go then?
Well, then the front was nearing, and they were trying to liquidate Plaszów. And we were herded into the Appellplatz in Plaszów, and were sitting down there for several hours. And the SS crew, they were all cruel, but these were particularly cruel people, rounded us up and took us to the station, I don't remember what station, in Krakow, and loaded us into the freight train cars without any opening, without anything. And we had to run in columns, walk there, and then from the point near the train, run the four in the column and jump into the train, up, And who couldn't and fell down, it was the end of him. If somebody from that 4 row, didn't pull him up, and all that. Well, anyway, the train was organized, and we were driven. Mauthausen is in Upper Austria near Linz, so we didn't know we were going. We broke out the part of the wall in the train to have a little air going on. Anyway, half of the people, I would say, died in that transport. And the ones that survived and came out in Mauthausen, we could see through that broken part that we were passing like the outskirts of Vienna, from Krakow to Upper Austria. It was by Vienna there. Big city, so we figured it must be Vienna. Somehow or other, some knew. So what happened was, when we were in Mauthausen and marched into the camp, so I remember understanding German. We were escorted by the Nazis, by the guard, SS guard. So the guy was asked by one of the SS men there, already near the camp, Mauthausen, where are they from? So the guy says, "Das sind polnische Juden, these are Polish Jews." Well, we were then taken to the camp, and again, stripped, naked, and gone through a similar procedure, and given the prisoner's garb, and assigned to. We could see already the crematorius of Mauthausen. At night it was lit up and all that. Mauthausen, we were just walked to a stone quarry, for example, some part, and also in a column we had to pick up a part, a big piece of stone and 100 steps up, and then in a column march it and dump it there.
When we ended tape number 4, Mr. Davis had just arrived in Mauthausen. So if we could come back to that moment after you arrived in Mauthausen, and you could again tell me of your entry into the camp, please.
Well, it took the trip from Mauthausen from Plaszow to Mauthausen took more than 24 hours. We arrived the following day there at noon or so, and were marched to the camp. And about this soldier, the desk, this assessment, the desk, where is the transport from? And I did mention that he said to him, these are Polish Jews. Well, we came to the camp, and again we were going through a Entlausung, which means delousing, but it meant leaving the clothes on one side, walking into the bed, the showers, and walking on the other side and getting, again, striped clothing. And then we were...
Was there a selection of any kind when you first arrived?
No selection at that point.
Okay.
Right. I don't recall where we spent the first night, or we were put up in one of the buildings there. And at night, as it got dark, the crematoria, you could see the flames of the gas chamber, of the crematorius rather. So we had an inkling what was going on there. However, Mauthausen was not like Auschwitz, only extermination. They have prepared transports for sub-camps of Mauthausen, where people went to work for some industries while being in the camp at night, working during the day. Well, we'll come to it in a little while. I don't know what exactly how many people were in Mauthausen at that point, but there were many thousands.
Can you describe for me the physical layout of the camp?
Well, I was at the camp. These were, I believe at this point, I really am not sure because I don't recall the details. Altogether, I wasn't very long in Mauthausen, but the Mauthausen was, as far as I can recollect, that solid buildings. It wasn't barracks. And what should I say? That right.
How many people were living in the building where you were assigned?
I really, with precision, I cannot answer that question.
Approximately.
Well, there were bunk beds. There were so many people to a room. I couldn't answer that question with certainty. Okay. To keep us busy before there were appels each morning and each evening, and to work, especially the new transports, they would put us to slave labor, to work marching in columns to a stone quarry. Everybody, this was in column. Everybody had to keep straight, that, not to step out of line or something like this, because somebody could not manage to keep up with the thing. He was shoved aside by the guard and shot simply. That stone quarry was 110 steps, I believe, below the road that we were walking. So we had to go down the steps, grab a big rock, put it on our shoulder, and then go up the 100 somewhat steps up, again, form the column exactly, and walk a mile and a kilometer and a half to dump that thing. I believe they were building a road or whatever, or it was just work just to drain people out of their health, their power. Well, Mauthausen was, as I mentioned, the main camp and was supplying labor for the surrounding areas that were that were working for factories. And after, I believe, would have been probably 3 weeks roughly, certain people from the barrack, or don't recall the circumstances, or on the Appellplatz, certain people were sort of selected, not selected, but cut off simply from the rest of it. And we were just simply, they formed a group of people, and we were transported again, I believe, to a train, and taken over to St. Valentin, which is a city on the border between Upper and Lower Austria. Maybe better known place is Steyr Works, steel, which were a steel factory. In St. Valentin.
Could I ask you one question before we discuss your experience at St. Valentin? When you were in Mauthausen, were there people from all different nationalities and different countries in Mauthausen? When you were in Plouschow, it was mostly Polish Jews. In Mauthausen, in Austria, were there a mix of nationalities?
Yes, in Mauthausen there was a mixture of nationalities. There were even non-Jews there too. Russian prisoners of war, Soviet prisoners of war. Some, well, I don't know. I mean, with precision, I cannot tell you how many people they were, but Mauthausen had a steady turnover. New transports came, and these were dispatched to different places to work.
How did the people from different countries, the Jews from different countries, get along within the camp?
Well, you cannot say anything about, I cannot answer that question, because this was not normal. We just got up in the morning in a hurry to the Appellplatz, in a hurry back to work, into the stone quarry, and the evening everybody was exhausted, tired and all that. There was no social activity, there was nothing like that. Everybody was just exhausted to his limits.
What happened if people needed medical attention?
There was no such a thing. They killed people that could not carry on.
Were you aware of the medical experiments that were being taking place in Mauthausen?
At that point, I was not.
Okay.
Was not aware of that thing.
But the crematorium kept going day and night?
Right, as far as I recall, yes. It wasn't so much in Mauthausen as later on that they had a sick room like let's say, but whoever did dare to go to the sick room must have thought, that's it. I mean, this would be the end of him. They would not let him out alive again. So people that were aware of it were simply avoiding that.
Thank you. Then we'll go back where we were when I interrupted you. You had been taken from the Mauthausen, the main camp, to the sub-camp in St. Valentin.
Right.
Would you tell us about that experience, please?
Okay. It was still before the winter that we were transported to St. Valentin. And when...
Do you remember what month it was?
No, I do not.
Okay. But it was 1944.
Right. 1944. Correct. We have come to St. Valentin, and the first day I remember the march to the camp from the train station, but I don't remember the circumstances, what happened the first night where we put up, but in the camp anyway, and then the following days just a moment. Right, we were talking about St. Valentin, pardon me.
Take your time. Take your time.
Right. St. Valentin, right, we were put up for the night in a camp that was formed there in a forest about a kilometer or 2 kilometers from the factory where we worked. It was a cutout area of a forest, and there were barracks, and there was a barrack especially for Jewish inmates. When we were taken the first day to work at the factory there, it was a steel machine. We were worked on drilling presses, different machines to work on steel. And when we came there, we found out that the machines were served by prisoners of war from Belgium, from France, from Holland, maybe others that I'm not aware. And we were to replace, and we did replace them in time. They've taken these prisoners away. For what reason and for what purpose, I don't know. But they were taken away from there. Maybe they were trying to put them up in prisoners of war camps. And we replaced these people. We were taught how to service these machines, and usually everybody could adjust himself to knowing what he's doing. It would have been a sabotage or something had anybody pulled the wrong lever or too early or too late, and that would have been punishable by death probably.
Did you ever witness acts of sabotage?
No, I did not. During my stay in St. Valentin, American planes came over, as they often did, and they have the siren would be put on, and we were taken. The whole crew, everybody in the factory, would be taken to the basement or underground shelter, and they did that not out of having a soft place for us, but in their hearts, but they were taken because we already knew how to service these machines, and they didn't want to start the whole thing anew. So we were often subjected to American bombardments, and one of these air raids were on this particular place, this particular factory was bombed, and not our building. Our building suffered, the roof was blown off. It was a huge factory, with huge cranes and automated and all that. So on the roof, I'm not talking a roof of a little barrack or something. These were solid concrete buildings and steel buildings and all that. Some of the machines were damaged, but the next day we did the cleanup, and under the open roof, damaged, some places entirely blown off, we were put back to work.
Did the Germans treat the prisoners, the inmates, differently because the Allies were bombing and were getting closer? Did you notice a difference in their treatment as a result?
Actually not. No, the treatment was not better. If anything, I don't think it was one way or another. We were just treated the same way. By the way, at work, we worked 12 hours, 1 week, a day shift during the day, the other shift or the other week was the night shift, so 12 hours changeable.
With the appellate both morning and evening?
Right. Okay, so we simply served these machines and worked 12 hours. There were no SS or Gestapo. Of course, Gestapo was not, but the SS that had charge of the camp in that forest, little distance from the factory. There was the SS, but at work there was no SS. There were German, the leading. The Germans were, like, for example, they were part of a factory doing a certain operation. There was a German that was supervising the whole thing and seeing that things are done and put in the right place and passed on to the next stage and so on and so forth. And I remember one guy he was a Sudetendeutscher, Sudeten German, that was the guy that was around our factory. And he sort of looked cynically, at these people that are serving these machines, these prisoners of war. Well, I don't know. I just think it was just we were deprived of all our feeling and think was so down. Our morale was so down that we were not. There was no emotions. We were just driven, like dogs, like horses, back and forth and all that. So this is how the time in Mauthausen till April or so of the following year, 45, went by when the Russians occupied Vienna and were also moving west of Vienna. So at that time, this would happen to our things. They weren't just killing Jews, they were trying to take them further from the Russians, from the advancing front. So we were taken to a place in the Alps, I would say halfway between the cities of Linz and Salzburg. The place was called Ebensee. This was deep in the Alps, and they were, in German you say Stollen, which is a dugout in the mountain, a campsite, not a campsite, but this is what they kept ready if they wanted to kill off the Jews, to sort of put them all up there and bomb it out and something like that. But they never got to that far. we were from Ebensee. Now I'm talking about the concentration camp in Ebensee.
Now, Ebensee was also a subcamp of Mauthausen?
Well, no, it was not really. It was not a subcamp. This was already some distance. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think this was some distance from Mauthausen. But maybe it was a subcamp after all. Because
Regardless, what did you do in Ebensee?
in Ebensee, I remember this. They have taken the prisoners, put on a, not driven, but driven I meant walked in columns to the train station, and going to the, they drove us, they took us to the point called Atnach-Puchheim, which was halfway between Linz and Salzburg on the rail line. That was heavily, the rail line was heavily bombed by the Allied planes. And there were huge craters, and the Germans needed that line open. So after each bombardment, they took columns of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, to cover these craters, and so they could restore the line open, because they were within a radius of several kilometers, maybe 10 or so bombs, bomb craters strewn out, so they wanted to intercede the German supply.
How often were the Americans and the Allies bombing these tracks?
Well, I would say, by saying constantly would be the wrong description, but I would say that every few days they were aware of what was going on there, and they were just bombing that, also bombing industries and plants of different sort. Right.
So you worked to fill in these craters during the day?
Right.
And then you went back to Ebensee?
Yeah, right. And in the evening, after it was getting dark, because there we were guarded by the SS.
And what was the layout physically of Ebensee?
We actually, from there, we didn't, the Ebensee, you're asking me?
Yes.
Well, Ebensee, the town, the city of Ebensee, is in a beautiful region of lakes deep into the Alpine region. And it's so much at the foot of the mountains that sort of the sun doesn't come out till, if it's to the east, these mountains, and to the south, till late in the morning, rather. It was beautiful, but of course that beauty did not mean anything to us. We were, on the contrary, because it was cold and we were shivering and constantly cold and subjected to the terror and all that, just made everybody, drained everybody out of his rest of the thing. I remember these columns to the train station and again back. I remember I also felt that way. We dragged our feet. The people became so emaciated and so weak and so skinny that the feet were swollen and they could not walk and all that. It was just, the end of the road almost. So this is how, and then of course,
How long did you have this routine at Ebensee? How long were you there?
in Ebensee was the place that I was liberated on the May 5th, 1945 by the American forces. And we had an inkling, that something was going on because some of the SS guards sort of skipped we could see the next morning or the next day, we could see that some SS guards that we have seen and we have noticed their faces already, so they weren't present there. So we surmised that something is changing. And
Did the guards demand more of the prisoners before the liberation when you sensed something was changing?
I would say in general, that was, Germans were sort of aware of the crimes that they have committed. And they were just thinking about the consequences that would happen to them after the Allies come in there. And they sort of tried to distance themselves from the thing. This is why, I don't know if it, under what circumstances, desertion or whatever it was, but some of the, as I say, some guards disappeared from there. I should mention also that also in Ebensee, but also at St. Valentin, there were not only Jews but other nationalities too. Also German criminals and homosexuals, German political prisoners. The criminals especially, they were given the job of a capo. The name was called capo. That means he was supervising a certain group of people. And I remember some were even human, some were cruel, but some were even a little human. And I remember there was a Jew from Borislav there that was a capo on that Borislav camp. And he denounced many Jews. And the words came to the capo and through the Jews from Borislav about that Walek Eisenstein. This was the guy from Borislav that was a capo there. He was, the German capos made his life so miserable, and they drained him. He was submitted to so much pressure, and food was withheld with him, all that, that he died before the liberation. And some other guy, I believe from Krakow, also was denounced, a younger guy, for his activities, a Jewish guy, for his activities in Plaszow. Well, I would say that it was very difficult, really, because, as I mentioned before already, we lost any feelings, we lost any human touch. We were like animals, driven and not let go, and constantly under that pressure, constantly under driven, and had to know that to survive you have to do certain things, otherwise it's the finish. Well, of course, May 5th was a breaking point for us, and it was a time when the American army came that we were all of a sudden let out, and everybody could go on his own and do things before any organized help was made available.
We ended tape number 5. Mr. Davis was telling me about the American Army coming in to liberate Ebensee on May the 5th, 1945. So if you would tell us, please, what happened. Could you describe the liberation of the camp?
Right, as I mentioned, the SS disappeared, the German guards disappeared, and the Americans came in. I don't know what company it was, what battalion, and so on and so forth. Don't know the details, but anyway, all of a sudden it was open and everybody could walk out simply. And so did I. It was a May 5th, beautiful summer day, and I remember coming out of the camp, and at the foot of the mountain there was a grass, lying down at the grass, and sort of looking up, and a thought occurred to me, where am I? What happened to me? What happened to everybody that was near and dear me? And I tried to collect my thoughts, and where do I go from here? What do I start? Where am I? I don't know. All of a sudden I am in the Alps. I didn't know the country, and well, so when they went by, other people, everybody was trying to consult and talk to other people, liberated and all that. Well, some were stronger, some were weaker, and people decided to do something, to what we call then to organize. Organize meaning organisieren in German, means to go to the villages and towns and to the farmers and get bread and get meat and get things, demanding they were supporting the Nazis. They were all for the Nazis. So we sort of felt, like demanding. Well, after a few days of scouting the area near the camp, we decided, a group of about 10 boys, decided to take the train and go to that place where we were, Katnang-Puchheim, where the train from Salzburg to Linz, that we were covering the craters, the bomb craters. Decided to go there, and the train went just short of the station there, because it was again bombed, and we did not go there to repair that. So here we got the end of the line, and where do we go there? So the train east and west is not going because it's interrupted by the bomb craters, but a line north from Atnang-Puchheim, which is a small two towns side by side, there was a rail line going north towards the German border, Bavarian border, towards Braunau, where this bandit Hitler came from, where he was born. Well, we didn't go to Braunau, we didn't know where we were going, but the very first town that we came with the train was Ried im Innkreis. Ried im Kreis, or im Innkreis, which means in the area of the river Inn, INN. We got off the train there and went to the city hall of demanding a place to be put up and food. Sure enough, it was close to vacation time. I don't know whether they emptied the school, made things available to us, or don't remember the circumstances. They gave us, there were food stamps there still, so they gave us food stamps and they gave us a place to stay. And slowly we found out that it was a sort of best that we could do for the time being, trying to regain our health a little bit, trying to regain our mental balance and all that connected with it. There were American soldiers all over the place. This was also Upper Austria. And while those people that stayed in Ebensee after the liberation, they were taken care of by American forces, in the first few days, and then other organization came into play. But we, the group of about 10 boys, we took off on our own, and we decided to make our own way. In Ried, the Austrians, we didn't hide who we were. We were different. Our faces were different. Our heads were, hair was cut off and shorn, and so we were recognizable.
How did people respond to you?
People responded with, well, they were trying to show a pleasant face, and saying that they didn't know about all these things that happened, and saying that, well, that they are themselves have it so hard through the war, and all those things, and trying to placate us that way, and of course trying to give us food to eat there, and also to take with us. Well, it was a hard time for us, but after the horrors of what we went through, of course it was a liberation. It meant really freedom, and we were on our own. Some of the Jewish people from Poland thought of going back to Poland, to their hometowns, to see if somebody else in the family lived through the war and was alive. In my case, being that I came from an area that was occupied by the Russians and became a part of the Soviet Union, I did not think that I would go to Poland. I knew that from my family, mother and father perished, my sister perished.
How did she die during the war?
Yes, she was, when they liquidated the ghetto, she was...
The ghetto in
Drohobych, right? She was taken to Brunica and perished there in the mass graves. And this was in 1943, and the month, it was, I believe, August.
And your brother, did you find out about your brothers?
Well, as far as my younger brother, I mean, the second brother, I was the youngest. My brother Ludwig, he was drafted into the Russian army, so he was someplace, he wasn't, we didn't know where he was, but I figured that he's probably in Russia someplace alive. But my oldest brother, when they liquidated the camp at Płaszów, or Płaszów, I should say, they have taken some people with special skills and left them behind to be at the service of the Nazis, the Germans. My brother was quite handy with many things. He did, among other things, saddlery. This wasn't his trade, profession or anything, but he knew how to reupholster a couch or paint different things. So he knew how to make that, and they made these people that had special skills and could do things like saddleries, horse saddles, and things that they would serve their pleasure. So they have picked out about 100 people with special skills and left them behind. While I was in a transport to Mauthausen, which we figured, well, this is going to be the end of us. He stayed behind in Płaszów, so I have figured that he would have a better chance of surviving. Yet every trace of him was lost. I tried after the war, after liberation, I contacted the Red Cross, the joint distribution, the highest various international organizations. I have wrote different places, no response, no effect. So the trace of him was lost. Simply, I don't know what happened to him. But had he been alive, then somehow or other he would have looked for the family of ours too, the rest of the family.
So knowing what
So
you did
knowing
about the
knowing what
family.
knowing what I knew, I had no reason to go to Drohobych, being that this was a part of the Soviet Union, and having heard also that Stalin's dogma that he didn't trust his prisoners of war returning from Germany, German prisoners of war, not to have them go home, but send them into Siberia. And rumors were, you've heard it there, that people that were in the concentration camp, Jews or otherwise, also were distrusted by the Soviet authorities, and they would not let them stay in their homes, hometowns even. And so people sort of shied away from returning back. But people from the German-occupied part of Poland, many of them did go to see if any family was alive, to see what they can rescue of their property and so on and so forth.
So what did you do at this point?
At this point, Ried became, it was just a small town, and became limited in our possibilities. I mean, what could we do? We could have some rest there periods and build up our health a little bit and all that, but it offered little. So we found out that in Linz, in the larger city, there was a displaced camp being organized. It was called Bindemichl. Spell it? Biddermichl. Bindemichl. Well, we came with the train to, by that time, the train rails were repaired and all that. It was winter time probably the first time, winter of 45, that I decided to look for other possibilities. And several of us got together and went on a train and went to Linz, to that Bindemichl camp, to find out what's happening there. And there were many people, many in transit from Poland to Israel, that were staying there for several weeks or several months possibly, to also be ready for that Israel. I somehow or other had also a chance to go to Israel, but I belonged to Zionist organization before the war, but somehow or other I didn't feel at that point that I can bear another strain on me, and I decided to just let it go for a while, just try to regain a little balance in life, mental and physical. And being in the Bindemichl several times, I rode between Bindemichl, Linz, in other words, and Ried. And then I decided maybe it would be better to move to Bindemichl and have a little more contact with the other survivors.
How many were there in Bindemichl?
Bindemichl had several thousand people, let's say 2,000 to 3,000 people. Among these different people was Simon Wiesenthal. I got to know him, and we got to know each other. He was, I believe, like I was in that camp in St. Valentin. He was dispatched to a camp called Gusen. I believe that's where he was. And that he survived the war. And well, I'm returning to the thing. After the war in Bindemichel, I met him and knew that he was trying to get some political work. I meant political. I meant to try to go after the culprits, the culprits of the what happened to the Jews, of the disaster that overcame the Jews. And he opened an office in Vienna, got financial help, and I and 3 other guys worked with him there.
And what did you do for him there?
Documentary work, office work, in other words, trying to put names together and trying to compare the records that we could get a hold of, and sort of forming some documentation. This was in the city of Linz, and well, every day we went to work there. And right, I did not mention, and this is crucial. I mean, this is very important. That in Bindemichel I met many people. I met my future wife then. This was a Jewish girl from Vienna, and her parents and her were sent from Vienna when Hitler occupied Austria to Theresienstadt. And then, after several years, she was taken, the family, with a transport to Auschwitz. And the parents perished there, and she was segregated and sent to different camps, and she was liberated by the English army in Bergen-Belsen. And then she came back from the liberated camp, went to Vienna back to look, because she didn't know, she had a brother also, that could escape, was not escape, but was forced to leave Austria, part of Germany then, to Israel, to Palestine then. And so she was looking for survivors in Vienna, didn't not find anybody, so she came also to Linz and found some distant relatives there. So she was in contact with somebody. And I happened to get to know these people, and so I got to know her. And in November of the following year we got married. This was in Ried again.
And this was now 1946?
1946, right.
What was your new bride's name?
Her name was Berta Ziegler. Berta, the last name Ziegler. We have changed. She was called Bertel, diminutive, and from Bertel became Betty. So she also had, I believe, she was interviewed about her wartime experiences. Well,
so after you were married, did you continue to live in the displaced persons camp? In the DP
we lived
camp?
for a while. We sort of went to Ried. It was a small town, but we found that we wanted a little separation from the crowd, so to say. So we decided to go there, but weren't long there and came back, and I started with Wiesenthal, the work, so it kept me busy. She got also a job in the administration of the displaced camp, person camp, there with UNRWA, RRA.
Did you work the entire time you were in Bindemichel? Did you work the entire time for Wiesenthal? Did you do any other work as well?
Yes, I probably This was before. Well, I don't remember, was it before or after work with Wiesenthal? I worked for the Joint Distribution Committee. They had warehouses of food and clothing there, and a guy from England, a Jewish guy by the name of Winston, I remember. I did speak English, so we could very well communicate, and I worked there in the office, sort of also taking stock of what is and what left and so on and so forth. But this must have been before Wiesenthal's work.
And this stuff, as you call it, that you were inventorying for the Joint Distribution Committee, was that given to the?
Yes, this was for the disposal
Okay.
of the thing for the purpose of feeding the people, the survivors. There was food, as I said, clothing, different items of personal use and so on and so forth.
How long did you remain there?
We remained in Bindemichel, actually. Bindemichel's people were immigrating to various places, to the United States, to Canada, to South America, to Australia, New Zealand, some to France, even England. So in other words, it was shrinking in size. It shrunk in size to a certain extent that we decided that they decided that they would return these buildings to the Austrians, and they would take us to a place, a suburb of Linz, Asten, from where I immigrated to America.
And when was that?
That was in 1949. I do want to mention something about Bindemichel, because the Jews did not have a place to be put after the war. They scattered in Austria, to different small places. That they appealed to President Truman for some help. It came with the American government's direction that a place be given to these people Jews liberated there, and it was surely the Austrians had to leave their houses, not like they were thrown out, humanly and all that, but they had to make place for the survivors. Right. And so they felt, this is why they felt, it must have been beginning of 49, that these people should go back to their houses, and because there weren't so many displaced persons already there, that they would change from Bindemichel to Asten, which was a place that we were put up till we also immigrated. And the places were given back to the Austrian occupants, to the Austrian, not occupants, but tenants. Well, my Betty found her brother through, I don't recall, probably through the Joint or Hayas, that her brother was alive and was in Israel. He was on the ship that was sunk by the British in the port of Haifa, and they had to swim to the shore. So when this was years later, when we were already in America, she was trying to tell him to come to America to join us with the family, and us also. He was such an ardent Zionist that he would never leave. He would say that he would never leave Israel. But as it happened, some years later, we already changed from New York and other places.
I would like to go back for a moment, if we could, please,
Right.
to your coming to America.
Right.
What made you decide to come to America?
America had some family of my wife she was in touch with them, some couple of aunts with families, and also a cousin, not a part of these families, also already a grown-up man and married, that was close in touch with us in Austria. So this was a very important part, I mean. And then everybody saw the beautiful magazines, heard about these beautiful things in America, Hollywood and Manhattan and all these things. And so certainly this attracts. Everybody has a car and things are so wonderful. Why not try to go there if you have a chance?
And how did it meet your expectations?
Well, different. I mean, America is not all gold that shines. There are several different sides of life in America. True that it offered people the chance to do what they were able and what they wanted to do. It did not force you into anything. You didn't have to have, if you had skills and you had the opportunity, you could go as far as you were, whatever was within your reach. And people that came, completed studies and academic degrees, could find many opportunities here.
What opportunities did you find, Mr. Davis?
Well, being that I just completed middle school, gymnasium, and 2 years under the Russian, this is graduation, like from high school, with a little more knowledge, of course. We decided we are going to stay in New York. So we found a place through the relatives in the Bronx. And Bronx was then a very nice place near the Grand Concourse. And I found a job, and
What did you do?
I don't recall. We stayed in New York for 4 years, and I had about 20 different jobs. Being that I did not have any profession and did not have any particular skills, I had to change. I've attended evening courses in television repairs and all that. So I've tried to learn something that could be useful. And going, of course, to work during the day and going to school again in the evening. We lived in Brooklyn at that time.
Mr. Davis was telling us about life in New York. And I would like to ask you if any significant things happened in your family life while you were living in New York.
Of course, a very significant part of my life happened. My first child was born where we lived in Brooklyn, and the name is Anne, and it was a dear, precious moment in our lives. We did not have closer relatives, no parents, no grandparents, no brothers, sisters. I didn't. So it was part of me.
And what year was Anne born?
Anne was born July 1st, 1951. And Betty stayed home and could take care of her while I worked at various jobs that I had during that period of time.
And did you remain in New York?
We remained in New York for 4 years. From our coming to America, which actually was in Boston, we came to America. The ship was docked in Boston, and from there by train to New York. We left New York. We left New York for Denver in 1954. To move to Denver, I had made a small trip, exploration trip, got on a Greyhound bus. Took me like 3 days and 4 nights or something like that, till the Rocky Mountains got in view. of the route and I could see that. I have a cousin that was that I discovered later, who is a son of my mother's brother, and they were born in Vienna, and when Hitler marched into Austria, he and his brother Hermann escaped to Switzerland, and from Switzerland to America.
And what are your cousins' names?
The older brother is Hermann, and the younger is Leo.
And the
The last name is Stegmann, right? So when I found out at that time Hermann was in Seattle, but Leo lived in Denver. I decided in New York, I had it rough in New York. It was not easy for me. And I decided to look for some other place. Maybe it will be I could do something more suitable for me.
And what did you find in Denver?
And I came to Denver, and I got in touch with an outfit in Denver that was furnishing motels and hotels and institutions in their interior. In other words, selling all the interiors, lighting and carpets and furniture and so forth and so forth. The name of the place, if this is of any significance, was Radinsky and Sons. And when I came to Denver and went over the place, I asked Mr. Radinsky, I introduced myself and asked him if I moved from New York to Denver, could I have a job? So he said, certainly, assured me anytime I'm in Denver, should come, and the job is there for me. And when we did move to Denver, and I got that job, I did get an assignment, which was my area, to cover the area of the western slope of Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. And if I wanted to go further, nobody objected to it, as long as it was productive. So I did go to Arizona and Nevada also. And of course, during that time, this was 54 to 58 years in Denver, a very important thing happened to me. My second child was born there, and her name is Terry. Terry lives now in Rye, New York. She married also. She's married, and her last name is Gross, Gross.
And when was her birth?
Beg your pardon?
What year was she born?
She was born, she was born December 23rd, 1956. So with the two girls, we were a well-rounded family. I mean, we felt happy and all that. One winter, we decided to go to California simply and see what is California like. And this was about Christmas time, and in California there were some acquaintances of Betty's parents that survived the war in Shanghai from Vienna, and when they came to America from Shanghai, when the communists took over China, they simply sailed to San Francisco and stayed there. So we came to visit them in San Francisco. And besides San Francisco, we also went to Los Angeles, where also some acquaintances were of ours. And between San Francisco and New York, I thought San Francisco was a beautiful place, and if we ever left Denver, that it would be San Francisco that we would move to. So we came back, and I went back to the job, and after 4 years of working for the outfit Radinsky and Sons, I decided what I could do for them, I could do for myself. I didn't have much money, but I had enough courage. And when we moved to San Francisco, I decided to open up my own place, and I knew that by then something about the interior decor, and not individual again, but commercial, institutional. And I formed a company that was called Davis Contract Interiors. I didn't need money really, but I needed goodwill of the people. I traveled from Oregon to Utah and Arizona and Southern California, and at that time there was a lot of activity in the areas of Reno, Nevada, and Lake Tahoe. New casinos and new motels were built, and I had good luck of getting a lot of business, getting new orders to furnish the entire motel or lighting in a casino or things like that. So I did well and was happy. Probably these were the best years of my life, outside of my childhood and Drawbridge with my parents and family. In 1958 in San Francisco, I found out that my brother was alive and came back to Poland after the Russian.
How did you find out at that point?
Also through some international search organizations, and I
This
found
is
out
your brother Ludwig.
Ludwig, my brother Ludwig, right? He survived the war, as I say, deep in Russia, was discharged from the Soviet army, as I mentioned before, and got married there, and someplace in Kazakhstan, they survived the war and came back in, I believe, 1947, back to Poland. And in Poland we found, that while he was in Poland, we found each other. I was not in Poland after the war at that time. But we found each other, and it was 48, and then 49, and 49 we immigrated to America, and we sort of lost touch with each other because there was the political atmosphere of the communist regime in Poland was very detrimental to these people that had relatives overseas in different Western countries. So the contact broke off for a while, but then of course it got on again. We have gotten in touch with each other, and I made a trip to Europe, to Austria, and when they arrived in Austria and Vienna, I had them taken off the plane that was going on to Israel, and by having an introduction to the American ambassador in Vienna, it was arranged that they could stay in Austria till they are able to immigrate to America. So it happened so in 1958 that he came to America. We were by then well established in the Bay Area. We moved to Marin County. Well, when he came to America, we still lived in San Francisco. It was him, his wife, and two of their children. He still lives in Northern California on a ranch there with his second wife.
Did you, at this point you're successful, you're doing well, did you travel back to Europe at any point?
Yes, I liked skiing very well. In Europe, the king was the dollar, so you could fly on a charter flight to Europe and stay there in Swiss or German or Austrian ski areas, for example, and would be less costly than to go skiing to Aspen or someplace in the Sierras.
How did you feel being back in Europe?
Well, I didn't go back to Poland or to my native areas, city, But I stayed in Germany, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, France, and well, I felt as well as I can describe for my own purposes. I mean, I was doing well and free, and we, 1966, we decided really that we all go to Europe. I bought a new car in Europe for delivery when we arrived there, and we arrived in Frankfurt, and I picked up the car. We made a tour of Europe. We went to Paris, to Geneva afterwards, through Switzerland to Zurich. Visited some relatives, distant relative of Betty's there. Went to Vienna. Betty wanted to show the kids the place where she was born and the area. So we stayed in Vienna, then went on to Munich, went to Amsterdam, to Brussels. The trip took 6 weeks, and after 6 weeks we boarded a plane back for San Francisco. The car was shipped to us.
When you were in Europe on any of your visits, did you look up people from your past, people that you had met in the DP camps?
Well, for example, in Paris, I've gotten together with a school friend of mine that was together with me in Drohobych, in the Gymnasium Drohobych. Right, for example, him. But also other people that I knew.
Did you ever look up Simon Wiesenthal again, since you had worked for him?
Yes, I have. During that trip, when we were in Vienna, we stayed in a hotel, and I myself took off for Simon Wiesenthal's office, and there he greeted me warmly and told me also during my stay with him, talk with him, that an SS man, the camp commandant of the Drohobych, of the Jagiellonska street in Drohobych, was caught, and the court proceeding against him are taking place in Bremen in Germany. And he asked me, "You are from Drohobych. Wouldn't you want to testify in this case?" So I didn't decide momentarily, but then I decided then certainly I would go to Bremen. I contacted the court in Bremen, and they have answered that I would be invited there. They would send me a flight, the ticket, and also pay me so much per day because of lost earnings or wages, whatever, which they did to the thing, to these people that were testifying there.
And who was the trial against?
The trial was against, his rank was Obersturmführer of the SS, Friedrich Hildebrand.
Could you spell that, please?
The last name is Hildebrand, Hildebrand. And my testimony was in the middle of January of 1967. The trial stretched for 10.5 months.
What were the charges against Hildebrand?
The charges were of murder initially in 15 cases. That was trimmed down to 5 cases and 4 help to testify, help in committing these crimes. So what happened was witnesses came from Australia and from all over the world, you know. Hildebrand was sentenced to life imprisonment, during my stay in Bremen, I stayed there for about a week or a little longer. There was also another assessment that was also attached to the camp by the name of Menzinger. I don't remember his first name, but his rank I know was Scharführer of the SS, Menzinger. So he was brought into the court and I testified against him. He was doing a lot of killing.
And was this in the same camp?
The same camp, right?
I'd like to ask you a few questions about that trial.
Right.
Were you in the courtroom for a great deal of the time?
Well,
You said you were there for a week.
Yeah, people were testifying were either from Drohobych or Borislav. So naturally, there was either old acquaintances or people that I got to know, and we had the common topic, right? So we simply had enough time. There was a German woman, she was actually a columnist in a paper there. She quit her job and devoted the time to covering the trial and wrote a book afterwards.
Did the trial get a lot of publicity in the newspaper while it was going on?
Yes, at that time it was important. It was a topic that was very, very current. Then the war crimes were popping up very often and in different places.
And what were you asked to testify as a witness?
Well, what do I know about Hildebrandt? His activity in the camp.
And what did you tell the court?
Well, I told the court when I was interned in that camp what I know about Hildebrandt, about his activities. Did I witness any of the cases of him shooting people or doing harm to people? And they generally wanted to know, the court wanted to know about my personal experiences. Even I was not a witness to any personal killing of Hildebrandt or Menzinger. Yes, I did witness an execution in the Borislav camp. The Borislav camp on the Appel Square, where we were heard it all in the morning and the evening. At one time they brought two Jewish young men that tried to escape from the job they were getting to and were caught. And they were brought to the Appellplatz, and there first somebody, camp commandant, I believe maybe it was Hildebrandt, would talk that this is what's going to happen to anybody that is trying to escape from the camp. And they were marched off and they were shot in front of all the people. And one of the victims wasn't shot dead, so he was still sort of alive, and we called somebody, the camp supervisor or somebody there, that notified the SS, and they came and killed the rest of the way. Well, anyway, at the trial, there are many people that said different things. I did not have, the court did not ask me if I have any specific knowledge or been a witness of any murders, any executions or anything. They wanted to know my life during the German occupation and the Jagiellońska camp in particular. And this is what I testified about, like many other people did.
Were you there when the verdict was rendered?
No, I was not. The trial, as I mentioned, lasted 10.5 months, And it started in the fall of '66 and went on to the summer of, well, not quite, 10.5 months, to beginning to the end of the spring of 1967. And that time he was sentenced to life imprisonment.
And that was Hildebrand who was
That was
sentenced to
Hildebrand,
life.
right.
Do
As
you
far
know
as-
if he had to? Do you know if he fulfilled that term?
Well, I cannot say anything about, I don't know anything that happened to him, because simply I tried to, after this book appeared about the trial, I've gotten a copy of it, and I saw my testimony in it, like other witnesses' testimony there, and I simply, years have passed and since then, and I tried to contact the writer again and couldn't find anybody, and even the publishing house is not evident there.
What was the verdict rendered against Menzinger?
I cannot say for sure because again I came back to California, got involved in my daily activities and all that, but I believe that he would have certainly, there was no death sentence in Germany. They gave him the most that was allowable, it was usual there, life sentence. What happened to him after those things, after years passed by, I have no idea.
I'm curious. If there would be criminals, Nazi criminals, alive today, who would be uncovered for the work that they had done, do you feel that we should continue with war crimes trials?
Well, I believe that's the least that can be done, that people that committed such crimes, such heinous crimes against humanity, that should be at least bring to trial. I mean, they deserve much worse than that. But I mean, years have passed by and things are different. And what can one say? I mean, it's difficult. The world is cruel. But of course, what happened in the Holocaust was unique in the human history. And this should, anybody that had any dirty hands in that, should certainly be brought to trial. I believe that in 1992, I made the first trip after 48 years to my native city, Drohobych. It's a part of the Ukraine. I spent there 6 days, and after 6 days, during my stay there, I went to the Bronica execution site, mass graves, where my father and my sister perished. I went to see our house on Stryjska ulica street. I walked the streets that I knew from before, where I spent my childhood years and my teenage years. And I was overcome by upon leaving the city after 6 days, I was overcome by the feeling, looking down at it, what horrible things happened here. There were 15,000 Jews in Drohobych. There were maybe that many in Borislav, within the jurisdiction of the Gestapo and SS there, also scattered through the villages there. And all this life was extinguished, people murdered. Nobody there. So my thought appeared, if anything like this should be prevented again for future generations, I believe that things cannot be forgotten, and this should serve as a monument to men's cruelty to men, of what happened in Drohobych happened in 6 million other cases. And I believe that this is something that is unique in human history, that as planned and determined mass murder on such a scale was performed. And I think it should serve future generations and humanity as an example for anything, for the things should never happen again, as a reminder to what happened then. I believe that this is what I wanted to say and present in my interview for my family, their children, the next generations, that they should know about it, and they and the following generations and their acquaintances should know about this. Well, this is about the extent that I wanted.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tape number 7. Mr. Davis, you gave us an eloquent expression of your feelings about your return to Drohobych and the importance of people remembering, and I would like, if we could now, to go back to that return trip to Drohobych.
Right.
I'd like you to tell me, please, what you actually saw in the town.
Yes, I came, I flew to Lvov and was driven to Drohobych, which is 1 hour's drive. And I had a contact in Drohobych, a Jewish guy, originally from Drohobych, and he was going to arrange for me the hotel and all the other things, and I did, and I was driven to Drohobych by his daughter that lives in Lvov, their acquaintances, to his house. When I came there, we didn't know each other, but we were we had common acquaintances. He is 1 year younger than I am, and lives in the house that belonged to her parents, his wife's parents. Well, I had to get a room in a hotel, and we went over to the hotel. I don't know if it's important, but it throws some light on the conditions in today's Ukraine. I came to the hotel, and I asked for a room, and they right away noticed that I'm a stranger, dressed different, not talking Ukrainian correctly. So he says, well, we don't have a room unless you go to the police, the militia, and they will say yes, then we can rent you a room. So we did go to the militia, and I, with this guy, he stayed down, and I went into the office and talked to the militiaman, who took me over to the guy in charge there. And the chief itself wasn't present, but his sub was there. So he asked me, well, you came to Drohobych and you're a native of Drohobych. How comes that you don't speak Ukrainian? Well, I said, well, I was born here and I lived here and I learned Ukrainian, but I don't have contact with the Ukrainians and I cannot tell you about it. So he talks to the militiaman that came with me into the room, was present at that. So he says to the guy, well, after a little making himself important, says, well, go and phone the hotel that they should give Mr. Davis a room.
So you got the room in the hotel,
Got the
and then
room in the
when you visited the town itself, did you visit your old home?
Yes, my first, I came that day, late in the day, so the first day was getting the hotel and getting a little bit organized and trying to rest up because I flew to Lvov from Warsaw. Next morning, I talked that same evening with this man, Arthur, is his first name, and I asked, could you get maybe a taxi that would take me to Bronica, take me to my home site at Stryjska ulica, also some distance away? Yes, he says, there is somebody here with a private car that you pay him something, not a very great sum, he will be at your disposal. But if you wanted, we could come with you. I said, very well, come with me. So next day he organized the trip and went first to the forest of Bronica and saw the mass graves there. And it was a sight that was very emotional to me, and some of the mass graves were entombed, and others were fenced off, like roped off. That the Ukrainians got money from Jewish organizations and from individual Jews from Drohobych that sent money for that purpose there. It was not so much the ill will as maybe the bad organization of the thing, getting the proper people, the material and all that. Also the lack of interest, really.
How many people are
Okay.
buried in those mass graves? Do you know?
No, it's hard for me to tell. It's hard for me to tell, but I would say several thousand, maybe 4,000, 5,000, people like that. Okay, we had the car at our disposal. I spent there about half an hour, maybe more than a half an hour, standing at each mass grave. And not knowing where my father and my sister are buried. Okay, so I stopped at each grave and said a certain prayer. Okay, after this, we got into the car and were driving through the city to the other side on Stryjska ulica, where our house was. And I described to them where on Stryjska ulica our house was. Because many houses that existed then are no more, especially houses that belonged to Jews that were dilapidated or something that were torn off. Our house was a well-preserved and a good, solid brick house. So I told them more or less where it was, and the car stopped within 100 meters or so, 100 yards roughly, from the house actual. She said, well, it should be here, because across the street there was also a house like that belongs to some Ukrainians. Not across the street, but catty corner like. So as I got out and they stayed in the car, I walk and look in the house and sort of think that this should be it, but it's not that. The ground floor, that was then the ground floor, is sitting deep in like a souterrain, like a basement. And the first floor is just a parterre, like a high ground floor. And I walk past the house and look, the storefront disappeared. It's a window, like a place to people that people live. And I see antennas, about 8 or more antennas, television antennas, sticking out. And I see, as I moved towards the other side, there's a blind wall, usually at the end of the property, the end of the thing, that there's just mortar and no windows, nothing like that. And this is all finished now and has windows there. So it was sort of looked strange to me. I figured after so many years, so what happened actually, they have widened the street and have tapped it several times. So in other words, the ground level became high and the house didn't go down, but in relation to the street level went down. As we walked down into the yard, as I walked down into the yard, the guy came out from the car and asked me, well, have you found it? That this is it? I said, no, I don't know. It looks like the house, but I'm not sure. It looks different. I'm not sure that this is it. And the houses are missing across the street, house and next houses also belonging to non-Jews. Well, time did its own, you know. So we walked into the yard and we see a man working in the garden, and there was another house in the back of the yard, in the backyard. In the depth, at the edge of the property, there was another house, a wooden house, not a brick house, but a wooden house. And this house, this was at the edge of a stream that went by there. This is going by there. That house is not anymore there. It's not in existence. So all the things threw me off. I wasn't sure that I'm there. So the guy came out and asked me this question, and well, we decided we're going to the yard. And there we met the guy that was working in the garden, and the guy said to him, well, he made a sort of funny, silly remark about me coming from America, wanted to, I'm the house, the landlord. So the guy didn't know if it's a joke or if it's a real truth. Well, anyway, he wasn't unfriendly, but he wasn't too friendly. Somebody else would have said, would you like to, I told him that I was born and lived in the house all my life till I was deported and all that. So he said, I asked him about the neighbors. So in other words, what I want to say is, if it would be somebody that would be a little more friendly, considered, would say, would you like to see your apartment? Would you like to go in the rooms? No, this didn't come up. I asked about the neighbors and mentioned that I would like to meet one of the neighbor. These old people are no more living. And on the other side of our property, the lady that I was in hiding in their basement, in
Her
this
name?
basement, Mrs. Krychik.
Okay.
Right. So when I came there with my escort, meaning the guy that lives there and at our place, and the people that came with me with the car, so a woman appeared there. So
At the Krychik house.
yeah. So I didn't know who she was. She wasn't a youngster, but wasn't very old. I figured, well, people change, but maybe she didn't change. I assumed that this maybe is Mrs. Krychik. But no, it's almost 50 years later. Then it was 48 years later. And she said, no, Mrs. Krychik is still alive, but she is bedridden and she doesn't comprehend. She's amnesia or maybe Alzheimer's disease or whatever it is, that she will not respond and react to this thing. You cannot talk with her about anything. Well, of course, not having this possibility. So I expressed my thanks to, this proved to be her son's wife, That was her daughter-in-law, and gave her a peck on the cheek and turned around and we walked back. This was the visit to our house. I figured it was not enough. I would like to go to some and meet some of the further neighbors or across the street, somebody that would could recollect and that with whom I could discuss old times. And I figured, well, I'll make another trip here from the hotel to here. But being as it is difficult, the taxi and is hard to get, the buses don't run regularly, and not being sure that somebody will invite me for a cup of coffee if I'll find somebody. And this is, it's exhausting trip. So somehow or other, after 6 days, I decided I'd better leave.
I'm curious about one thing. Did you go back to the old shul?
No, I'm sorry, I did not. It was a little distance from the thing. Would have to turn around. We were already in Bronica that day. We were at my house. So this we couldn't do. The old shul is used as a warehouse, I believe, or something like that.
Are there any Jewish people living in Drohobych
Jewish
today?
people? Yes. There are 8 Jews from Drohobych, married to either Jewish wives or to Ukrainian or Polish wives, and they are originally from Drohobych.
So there are
If they are still alive, I don't know. This was 1992. But during the Soviet regime there, Jews from other areas, from Kharkov and Odessa and Kiev and maybe from around Moscow also, happened to settle in Drohobych, which was a nice place, close to the Carpathian Mountains, close to a lot of industry there, and whether by choice or otherwise, they settled in Drohobych. So they stayed in Drohobych, and I got to know some of them. We did go to see the central synagogue, which stands there, except it's a little in disrepair, and I was asked to contribute some money to that cause. Well, after 6 days of having discomforts of the hotel was horrible, really, and somehow or other, I thought that I will come to Drohobych again and then go into details more.
So you came back. Now it's 1997, and I would like to know about your family today.
Yes, it's my touchy point. Yes, I have 2 daughters, and her middle name is Helene, and the last name is Geva or Jiva, G-E-V-A. She's my first daughter, and the second daughter is Terry, Marilyn, middle name, Gross, married name.
They're both married.
They're both married. These are their married names, and they have children. Each one has 3 children. Terry has 1 boy that is now in college in Boston. His name is Alon. The second boy's name is Amir. They are Israeli names.
Terry or Ann?
Anne, I'm talking about Anne's children, right? And this is, the youngest is a girl. Her name is Tali, and she is in school here in Allentown. Now, Terry has also 3 children, and the names are a girl, Jamie. She is in the last year of high school. Right. Then there is a boy, Jeremy. He is in the middle school in Rye, New York. And then there's a little guy. His name is Zaki. And their respected ages are let's start with Anne's children. 22 for Alon, 20 for Amir, and 15, I believe, correct, is for Tali. Jamie will be 17 this summer. Jeremy was born in 87. That would mean, right, 10 years. No, Jeremy is older than 10. Jeremy is 2 years younger than Jamie, or 2 years or 3 years. So Jeremy, excuse me, there's 6 names to dates to remember. So
Well, you have a nice large family.
well, Jeremy, he's in the middle school his last year, and then there's another little boy, Zachary, as I mentioned, and he's 10.
Thank you. I'm curious, do you think that your experiences in the war colored the way you responded to your family, your children and your grandchildren?
Well, certainly, it was a touchy subject for me to go into with my children, and they know something about it, but never in much details. It was painful for me, painful to bring it to the children. They know that they are children of survivors of the Holocaust, know about this, and in general terms, maybe some details, but never in too much details. I think the husbands of my 2 daughters are, Anne's husband is Michael Geva, he's an Israeli, and this Terry's husband, his name is Alice, and both families are very happy and happy family. I did want to mention how it came that Anne met an Israeli guy. We sent her one summer while we were in California. We sent her one summer on a 6-week stay in Israel to a kibbutz. And she met Michael there. When she came back, she was then at the Berkeley College. It wasn't the same man. She was in love with this guy, and she decided within a certain time that she would also go to, Michael was studying then at the University of Jerusalem, the Kibbutz Center, because he was so good in physics and math. And she also was in the university learning the language and other things. This is really how Terry also met her husband, because her husband, Ellis, wound up in Israel as a volunteer or something. He's a native-born American. Native-born, I mean, not an Indian, but born here in this country. And his father and mother also. But Terry, when in 1972 the wedding was arranged in the kibbutz, so Terry asked us if we wouldn't send her a little ahead of time, and my wife and me came later. So we thought it would do any harm if Terry went to see her sister in the kibbutz. And there she met Alice and fell in love. She was then, I believe, 15 years or 15 and a half years, and it proved to be a happy marriage, and like Anne's, of course, is. So I think they're lovely families, and I feel very close to them.
I'd like to ask you one final question. Over the last 50 years, what do you think has sustained you?
Well, what has sustained me? I could say I have had my health problems, all right, plenty, but there is something, and I didn't feel it right after the war, but the nervousness, the stresses, the strains that I suffered then came to the fore, you know, while I was in America. It had its basis in the wartime experiences. But, you know, being exposed to the daily activity and the daily routine and, you know, being under stress in your daily life brought on the other thing. What has sustained me, you ask me? Well, what should I say? After all that happened, I don't know if I'm a believer or not, but I guess Providence had its hand in it somehow, because some people, you know, perished soon after the war. Perished, I mean died soon after the war. Some are still alive. I have a friend of mine, the one in Paris is there. I have a photo of the school, my school class. There are several guys that are alive now. One is in Spring Valley, New York, and that's in Rockland County. One guy, as I mentioned, in Paris, and in Israel, and in Montreal, Canada, one. So what should I say? Most of it, there was a girl in Jerusalem that was in my class. She died several years ago in Jerusalem. What sustained me? Again, the question, what should I say? Maybe the strength, the knowledge that my children are happy and they're lovely kids. I think that this is a great help in my life.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us this
Thank you.
interview. Mr. Davis to introduce his daughter Anne and to conclude our interview this afternoon.
Well, this is my daughter Anne, my older daughter. This interview takes place in Allentown. We are in Anne's house. The other daughter, the younger daughter Terry, could not be present here, and we are concluding about the interview. So
Anne,
Anne has
do you
got
have a few words
things
that
to
you
say.
would like to share with us?
Yes, I just wanted to say that my father never spoke about his experiences in the Holocaust while I was growing up. And whenever I did ask him about it, it was very hard for him to talk about it. I wanted to thank the Shoah Foundation for making this all possible. And I especially want to express my deep gratitude and love for my father, for him going through with this, because I know this was tough for him. It took a lot of courage to go back to those terrible days, and this is a real gift to your children, your grandchildren, and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Mr. Davis, could you tell us about this photograph, please?
Yes, this photograph shows the main square in Drohobych, in the city that I lived before the war and was born. And this is the main town square. The picture was taken, I couldn't tell. What it looks, Drohobych looks like this, similar to that.
How did you come to get this picture?
I'm not sure, but I believe that it was presented to me by the men that helped me in Drohobych to visit the places.
Thank you. Would you describe this picture for me, please?
Yes, this is the picture this is our house in Drohobych, Ostrijska ulica. You see that the ground is raised and the house became got lowered through it, and you can see the store was the windows below. There was a door, and now it's windows. The picture was taken about the time that I was in Drahovich, 92.
This photograph is a picture of,
This is a picture of my class in the gymnasium. It was taken, must have been taken in 1939. It shows our class. Now about 7 people out of this group, which I believe is around 30, survived the war. I'm in the picture in the left-hand corner.
oh, where are you?
Well, if I show, it's visible, right?
Can you identify yourself by what row you were in?
Well, first, second, third, the fourth, the third row, I'm here.
In the corner near the piece of furniture in the
Right,
very
right,
back with part of your
Right,
face
right,
concealed?
part of my face is visible.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 18 years old.
Okay, thank you. Could you describe this photograph to me, please?
Yes, these are the 2 girls from my class, from gymnasium. The one on the left side is Gina Bakenrod, the girl that I blushed when meeting her. The other one is Blanka Burk. She survived the war. Gina perished during the war, during the Holocaust. Blanka survived the war, and she died a few years ago in Jerusalem.
And do you remember when this picture was taken?
Yes, this picture must have been about 1938.
And how did you get this picture?
Well, Blanka Burk, when I was in Jerusalem, she had a picture of her own, so she gave me the picture of the 2 of them.
Nice, thank you. This is a photograph of what, Mr. Davis?
This is the picture of the extermination camp, Belzec, where my mother perished in 1942. This is a monument to the victims of it. I visited there in '86 while being in Warsaw.
And this photograph, Mr. Davis?
Well, this is as improbable as that's me. And the picture was taken in the mountains of Utah, in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah, and probably 1956. That's about it.
Can you describe this picture to us, please?
Yes, this is the picture of my family, my wife and the 2 girls, Terry and Ann, in our backyard in Corte Madera, California, Marin County. It was probably taken in 1980, excuse me. This was taken in 1969.
Mr. Davis, could you describe this picture to us?
Yeah, this picture was, I visited California in 1986. I've been since then there. I have a brother that lives there, Ludwig Davis, and I'm visiting probably his house in Northern California. That's me and him.
Very nice, thank you. Would you tell me about this picture, please?
Yes, this is the picture of my 2 daughters and me. I believe that it is in Allentown here in Ann's house. On the left-hand side is Anne Geva, and on the right side is Terry Gross. The picture was taken in or 5, or maybe later even.
Thank you. This picture, please.
Yes, this picture is my daughter with her husband, Ann Geva and Michael Geva. It's in their house in Allentown. And I believe this is a fairly recent picture, which I would think maybe 95 or 6. Should I wait for you?
Would you tell me about the photograph, please?
Yeah, this is the picture of my 3 grandchildren. The picture was taken at the graduation of my grandson Alon from Penn State about a year ago. Alon is in the middle, of course. On the left-hand side is Amir, and the right side is Tali, my granddaughter, and the 2 grandsons.
And this final picture?
Yeah, this picture is the family of my daughter Terry Gross with her family in Rye, New York. Her husband is Ellis Gross, and the kids from the left side to the right, Jeremy Gross, and Zachary Gross. And the picture was taken about 3 or 4 years ago. 4 years ago.
A beautiful family you have.